Hello, internet friends. I bet you're wondering why I've assembled you all here today for the third time. Well, I have a truly impossible challenge for you. A gauntlet, if you will. And I am talking, of course, about 100% completing the Pokemon Gen 3 games, which include Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, Leaf Green, Colosseum, and XD Gale of Darkness. As some of you know, I am towards the end of my own Gen 3 100% playthrough, and many of you have asked me, Tama, how can we be as cool as you? No, you've asked me, how do I go about organizing such a playthrough? And well, my friends, I have put together an extremely comprehensive guide of everything that there is to do in the Gen 3 Pokemon games. This generation in particular can be really overwhelming, and you want to make sure that you don't miss anything. Well, don't worry, I got it all figured out for you. Now, as always, my goal here is not to gatekeep completionism. If there's anything in this guide that you don't want to do, if there's anything that's outside of what you time-wise or financially want to commit to the games, then by all means, don't do them. The main goal of this project is to have a good time and go back to older Pokemon games so that you can find content that you haven't done in them before that might be enjoyable to complete. So because you and I both need so much stuff to do these Gen 3 100% playthroughs, I have teamed up with Retro Island Gaming, the sponsor of today's video. That's retroislandny.com. I never take sponsors. I made the exception just for them. Retro Island was kind enough to provide me with this copy of Pokemon Emerald, which is my second English copy for my playthrough, and also some nice Pokemon cards they threw into the order, so thanks. If you're ever looking to buy some retro games, I recommend shopping Retro Island first. They have over 5,000 unique gaming titles total, and here's the real money saver, they give you free shipping on any order over $80, which is every retro Pokemon game. So if you are trying to gather supplies for your own 100% playthrough, this is the place to look. Visit retroislandny.com or check the link in the video description or pinned comment. They stream their rigorous cleaning and testing process for all of their games over on their Twitch, so you know that they're going to take good care of you and give you good quality retro games. But it's not just games. They also have controllers, accessories. You need so many accessories for Gen 3. Cables, any cords you're missing. They have controllers and consoles. And if that wasn't enough, they also sell sealed or graded Pokemon cards, Pokemon plushes and other video game plushes, and cool import snacks and drinks. They ship internationally to 77 countries. And they also have an enormous selection of budget titles. You could even get retro anime and Pokemon DVDs or tapes if you want. Let's do a little shopping. It's buy two, get one free on all games under $11. You can get a lot of good games for under $11. They've got Super Smash Bros. 3DS, Wii Fit, Skyrim, Borderlands 2. Oh, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is only $9. Here's their GameCube selection. This is not part of the buy two, get one free. They got Pokemon Channel. Pokemon Channel has its own e-reader cards, you guys. Can you believe that? Oh, okay. Kirby Air Ride. Amazing game. Love that game. So check it out. Here is a 4-way link cable. This is one of the things that you're going to need for your 100% run of Gen 3. This is the GameCube to Game Boy Advance link cable that I have that works really well. It looks identical. So they've got it at Retro Island. They also have rechargeable battery packs for the Game Boy Advance SP, AC adapters, this swankified Game Boy Advance carrying case. Honestly, I kind of want this. I would put my wallet in it and use it as a purse every day. Oh, import games. There's an expansion pack for the... What is this? I don't even know what this is. Okay, I guess if you need a 100% Pokemon Channel, you have to get the Pokemon Channel expansion pack for the Japanese version of Pokemon Channel, my god. And they also have Japanese copies of Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green. Are these in box? Wow, they're in box. Look at that. So you get the whole game box art and manual with free shipping if you bought them from Retro Island. Retro Island is an online store, but they also have a physical store location in New York. So thank you so much to Josh, aka 4th Gen Gamer, for helping me out and sending me that emerald. and I hope that you all show him and Retro Island some love. Good brand synergy. You guys need retro games? I got the hookup. So Gen 3 is a bit of a different beast entirely than Gens 1 and 2. In Gen 1, there's only one region, and you don't need perfect Pokemon or good Pokemon in order to complete all of the hardest content in Pokemon Stadium. Gen 2. There is only one new region, and once again, Stadium 2 doesn't require you to have good or even perfect Pokemon, nor does it require you to understand the deeper mechanics of getting good stats on Pokemon in order to complete the hardest stuff in Gen 2. What's more, in Gens 1 and 2, you probably wouldn't ever notice a difference between Pokemon with low determinate values, which are the Gen 1 and 2 equivalents of IVs, and Pokemon with high determinate values, because there's not that much of a gap between the numbers 0 and 15. Additionally, you can't mess up stat experience training, which is the Gen 1 and 2 equivalent of effort value training. There's no cap on how much stat experience you can earn overall in Gen 1 and 2. There's nothing to track or min-max. It's very straightforward. Gen 3 introduces effort values, which do have a limited cap, and you do need to understand how to min-max this in order to get Pokemon that are really good at the things that they're the best at. I also forgot to say this, but Gen 3 also increases the range of IVs from 0 to 31, and there is a noticeable difference between using a Pokemon with 0 in a stat versus 31 in a stat, because there is a wider range between good and bad. In addition to this, Gen 3 introduces the Battle Frontier in Pokemon Emerald. In this facility, there are Pokemon at the highest streaks in some of the hardest facilities that have perfect IVs. And all of the Pokemon in every facility have effort values that are aligned to their most important stats. And in order to 100% complete all of the content in Emerald, you do have to get some really, really high streaks in the Battle Frontier. So you're gonna want the best chance possible to do that, and that will require having good IVs, maybe not perfect IVs, but good IVs, and it will require you to EV train intentionally in order to min-max that Pokemon stats to specialize it into its individual role on your team. Gen 3 also introduces abilities and natures, which are two additional characteristics that Pokemon can have that you have very little control over and are not changeable once the Pokemon exists. Each nature adds points to one stat and takes points away from another. So for most Pokemon, there are going to be two ideal natures that are really going to help it out the most, that are going to take away from stats it doesn't use and add points to stats that it does use. There are 25 natures in the game total, which means that 23 of those natures are going to be the wrong nature for that Pokemon in order to get it to do the things you need it to do. So not only does Generation 3 introduce the first content in any Pokemon game that actually requires you to understand how the nitty-gritty of Pokemon stats work, that requires you to actually get good Pokemon and train them right, it is also the gen that makes it 4 times harder to do that than it ever was. So you have your work cut out for you. There's also way more games in Gen 3 than there are in Gens 1 and 2, and each of those games also all have their own 100% requirements. To get good Pokemon for the Battle Frontier, you're going to want to pool all of your resources from all 7 games together so that you have the Pokemon you need, you have the items you need for those Pokemon, you've got the move tutors you need, and so on. But each of these games also have trade restrictions. So in order to get Pokemon for one game, you're going to have to complete all 7. There's also some Japanese exclusive content in Gen 3, most of which pertains to the e-reader. So here's the thing. I wrote this guide to be the most comprehensive list of things that you can do in Gen 3. You need a lot of stuff, and a lot of this stuff is either rare, expensive, or both. So the guide is written to give you an idea of everything that there is that you can do, and then I've left it up to you to be creative and figure out which combination of things that you actually want to do and how you're gonna approach doing that. So you may not need absolutely all of this stuff, depending on what you do or don't want to include in your run. For example, the GameCube games in both English and Japanese are a sort of time capsule of a lot of the mythicals that you could get in Gen 3. You can get Ho-Oh, Lugia, Celebi, and Jirachi using the GameCube. And there are requirements for trainer card stars in each game, which are a new objective for you for your 100% run, that include filling in the national deck. Those objectives for the national decks actually don't require you to have anything it considers a mythical, which in Gen 3 includes Lugia and Ho-Oh. So if you didn't want to do any GameCube content, or you only wanted to do it in one language and not another, you don't actually have to do all of that in order to get the trainer card stars. Or here's another example. To get Celebi from the Japanese Colosseum bonus disc, the disc requires you to have caught and purified all 48 shadow Pokemon on a Japanese save file for the game, or at least on a Japanese formatted memory card. The English bonus disc for Jirachi doesn't actually require you to have a save file for Colosseum at all. So if you don't mind that you're missing the English version of the game, you can actually omit the English version entirely and only play the Japanese version, because you will get the same Pokemon from the Japanese version as you would from the English one, if not more. And in fact, the Japanese copies of many of these games are significantly cheaper than in English. I do recommend playing through in whichever language is your native language, because it's an RPG, and I think you do kind of lose a lot if you don't understand the dialogue or what's happening in the game. I've written the guide for the English versions of the game because, first of all, I speak English, and probably most of my audience also speaks English and plays the English games. But the Japanese games are cheaper and have the most content, so you can actually cut out quite a bit if you only play through certain games in Japanese. Or you can meet the requirement for the Japanese bonus disc by copying your English save to a Japanese formatted memory card, and then still only play through the game once. And the reason that these things are not mentioned in the guide is not because I don't want you to do them. My sweet angels, please do whatever you find the most fun. And if you don't want to play through Colosseum multiple times, then please, by all means, don't do it. The only reason that they're not in the guide is just because it's too overwhelming to write contingencies for each individual thing that has a workaround. So the guide is intended to be sort of like a master document of all of the different content that there is, and then you can decide what out of all that content you want to do, and tailor your experience to that. So because each game in Gen 3 does have unique content, this run includes a lot of games. So let's start getting into what all you're going to need in order to do absolutely everything in Gen 3. Within the supply section of the guide, I do have contingencies for like different combinations of stuff that you can get if you don't want to do absolutely everything, or you don't have absolutely everything. You can still do a lot of things with just a few of the games. For example, you don't need every single game to complete the Pokédex. There's just different configurations of games you can use to do that. If you have the GameCube games, you only need Colosseum, XD, bonus discs, etc., and Leaf Green, and a Hoenn game. Whereas if you don't have the GameCube games, you need all of the Game Boy Advance games, but then you can do it all without having any GameCube games. A lot of the content in Gen 3 is also e-reader specific, and the e-reader cards are really where most of the price of the run comes from, because some e-reader cards are very rare and very expensive. So within the guide, I have a list of all of the e-reader cards that exist, but then I also have a list of just the e-reader cards that you would need to complete some of the other objectives in Gen 3, other than the e-reader battling content. So to start with, you need, of course, Game Boy Advances. You actually need 4 Game Boy Advances, not 3. I forgot that there is multiplayer content that requires 4 participants. You need 4 systems, all of which need to have link capability. In order to complete some of the objectives for this run, you're going to need to use wireless adapters. The Game Boy Advance SP is harder to use those with because the wireless adapters eat up the SP's battery like crazy, and they cover the charging port, so you can't have them plugged into power and use a wireless adapter at the same time. So the SPs are actually really difficult to use for the wireless content. So for that reason, I actually recommend the wider Game Boy Advance, because I find that the lifespan of the Duracell batteries that you can use for these, the AA's, is just a little bit longer than the rechargeable lithium ions and the SPs, and it's easier to use these for the wireless adapter content. Also, just personally, I like the ones that don't need the proprietary lithium-ion batteries like these, because you can put like rechargeable batteries in this compartment still, but you can use ones that have been made like this year, as opposed to the 10-year-old or more batteries that are in these. And lithium-ion batteries do kind of like degrade over time, they become less stable, and these are approaching almost 20 years. Oh my god, wait. I don't remember what year the SP came out, but these might already be 20 years old. And these take proprietary lithium ions, so you can't just replace them easily with a newer battery. So the reason that you need 3 systems is because there's wireless adapter content that requires 3 participants, and for those you're going to need the wireless adapters, and you're going to need 3 of them. So I have here 2 English ones, these, and 1 Japanese one. These wireless adapters are not region locked. You can get the Japanese ones and they will work with English games. In addition to the wireless adapters, you will also need a Game Boy Advance link cable. These are different from the Game Boy Color ones. They have this box in the middle, and you can't use your original Game Boy link cable with a Game Boy Advance game, so you will need this one. So this one is a 3-way Game Boy Advance link cable. So this is an aftermarket cable. I have kind of hit or miss luck with these. It can be very difficult to find one that's like the exact proper shape and width to actually connect to a Game Boy Advance without issue. And the last cable that you will need is the GameCube to Game Boy Advance link cable. This plugs into the controller slot of a GameCube or Wii, and this attaches to your Game Boy Advance or Game Boy Advance SP, like so. This allows you to trade Pokemon to and from Colosseum and XD. Before we get to the games, we're not done with peripherals. Here is the English e-reader. These are region locked, so that's really fun. You can only use this with North American games. And then this is the Japanese e-reader plus. You want the one with the green logo and the plus symbol because they had 2 different e-readers over there. To use e-reader content with your Gen 3 games, you will need 2 Game Boy Advances and a link cable. So one system has the e-reader in it, put it in the top like this, plugs right in there into the link cable slot. You scan the cards with one game and then a link cable plugs in here and sends the data to your main Game Boy Advance that has your Ruby or Sapphire in it. So now getting into the games you'll need. First we have English, Ruby, and Sapphire. These technically both have unique content from each other and from Emerald. They're also included in the run because e-reader content is not compatible with English Emerald. It's only compatible with English Ruby and Sapphire. So you will need these primarily either to do all of the e-reader content or to scan the Nutpea Berry. Next, you will need Leaf Green. Leaf Green can get you Slowpoke, Mewtwo, the 2 Kanto fossils, and the 3 starter Pokemon. However, Fire Red and Leaf Green have trade restrictions, which means that you can't start a new game, get a starter, send it to Ruby and Sapphire, and reset your game. What you need to do that is a second Kanto game, which is the only game that Leaf Green can trade with before you beat the game. So you're likely going to want a second Kanto game. Now there is exclusive e-reader content that's only in the Japanese version of Fire Red and Leaf Green. So I recommend, to be the most efficient, just getting a Japanese copy of Fire Red or Leaf Green, really doesn't matter. But, to have them both Fire Red. And that'll allow you to do everything that you need to do with these games. If you want to play through Colosseum in English, you'll need an English copy of Pokemon Colosseum. And the most important thing is the Colosseum bonus disc, or the PAL version specifically of Pokemon Channel is a way to get Jirachi. Now, without Pokemon Colosseum, you cannot get Ho-Oh, and you would have to play through other games multiple times in order to get Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, and the 3 Johto starters, which are available in this game. And there are 4 berries that you can only get in the GameCube games. Now, the most stadium-adjacent content is actually not in Colosseum. There are battle modes in Colosseum, but they're kind of, not very good. The fun stadium-type content in Gen 3 is actually in XD Gale of Darkness. It's a post-game mode that is only available once you complete this game, called Ore Colosseum, and that's actually quite difficult and a lot of fun. So I recommend doing that. This is also the only way in Gen 3 to get Lugia, and covers a lot of the Pokemon that you would be missing if you only had Emerald, from Ruby, Sapphire, and Fire Red and Leaf Green, but not Slowpoke. Now, as I mentioned, the Japanese version of Colosseum is something that you'll want to do to get Celebi from the bonus disc. This has all of the same content as the English version, plus a little bit more because there's e-reader compatibility, and you'll want to do it to get Celebi. In order to trade your Pokemon out of Japanese Colosseum, you will need a Japanese copy of Ruby or Sapphire. You don't need two, you can just do one. So this will help you get the Celebi and trade it over to your English Emerald. And there's also some Japanese exclusive content for the e-reader for Ruby and Sapphire in Japanese. Finally, you're going to need 3 copies of Pokemon Emerald. I have 2 in English here, thanks to Retro Island, but my 3rd copy is Japanese because you cannot mix records between Japanese Ruby and Sapphire and the English Emerald, and there are 3 secret base decorations that you can only get through the e-reader in the Japanese version of Ruby and Sapphire. So what you'll want to do to get those 3 secret base decorations into your Emerald is scan the card, send it to your Ruby and Sapphire Japanese, then use the Trader NPC, which you can get as one of the 5 old men in Mauville Pokemon Center. He's green. You can use that NPC. So there are 3 secret base decorations, which are the Reggie dolls for Regice, Regirock, and Registeel. These are only obtainable with a very rare and expensive Japanese-specific e-reader card, which you can only use with Japanese Ruby and Sapphire. And then you can mix records with these games to send that Trader NPC to Japanese Emerald holding the doll. And then from there, you mix your Japanese Emerald with your English Emerald to send the Trader NPC to this game, and then take the doll using this save file. There's also Emerald to Emerald specific multiplayer content that you might want to have games in English to experience so that you can mix records from your main save file and then see the stories about that save file in English on another Emerald. There is also Japanese exclusive e-reader specific content for Japanese Emerald, and there is Japanese e-reader specific content for Japanese Fire Red and Leaf Green. If you got all that, for a playthrough in English for each of these games, and to do absolutely everything, you need to have Japanese copies of Emerald, Ruby, Sapphire, Fire Red or Leaf Green, Colosseum. Now moving on to the e-reader cards. One card that you might want but is actually totally unnecessary in order to do other content in Gen 3 is the Eon ticket. This is a way to get Latios or Latias holding a Soul Dew. There's also a little tiny event attached to it where you talk to Norman and you go to one teeny tiny little new map. You can get Latios or Latias from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald as well. In each save file you can only get one, but then you can trade the other that you're missing from another game. So this isn't necessary to complete the Pokedex. This is the only way to get Soul Dew, but the Soul Dew is actually banned in the Battle Frontier, so you don't necessarily need it. The only reason that you might want this is if you wanted to RNG manipulate as a stationary encounter, Latios or Latias. This is one way to do that. The 2 most important e-reader cards are this one, which is the English Nut Pea Berry. This is the only English language e-reader card that allows you to get an exclusive berry that you can use to create Pokeblocks that will help you get absolutely maxed out perfect contest stats in all of the categories at once. There is another e-reader card in the Japanese Series 2 called the Kuo Berry. So if you wanted to, you could send that to a Japanese Ruby or Sapphire game instead of this one. Now, in addition to that, in English, there are all these trainer cards in this series. So you can scan these in and battle these difficult boss trainers in the house in Moss Deep that has that block door. So this could be considered an additional battling challenge. There are 60 of these cards total, plus some promos. After that, in Japanese, there was a Series 2 of the e-reader cards that's compatible with Japanese Ruby and Sapphire. That has 54 more cards. Then there are the e-reader series that is only compatible with Colosseum, and that is also 24 cards. Plus there are 3 shadow Pokemon that you can only get using those e-reader cards. The Japanese Fire and Leaf Green battle series works with Trainer Tower. It gives you like curated, unique towers that you can try and like time trial your way through. And there are 44 of those cards, plus I think 5 or 6 really super rare promo cards. Then Japanese Emerald has something similar with Trainer Hill. And the Emerald specific e-reader card set is 83 cards, plus 2 promos. So that's a lot of cards. Since that is battling content, I did include it in the guide, but since e-reader cards are quite difficult to track down and collect these days, you could consider it like a different category of 100%. So you could do 100% minus the e-reader stuff, or you could do 100% including the e-reader stuff, or 100% with just the 2 most important e-reader cards, which is the Regidoll card and the Nutpea Berry. And if you want to do RNG manipulation, there are some specific programs that will let you do that. They're all free. Some of them are Mac compatible. Unfortunately, Eon Timer, which is a pretty important program for RNG manipulation on cartridge, is Windows only. In terms of GameCubes, or things that can play GameCube games, you have several options. You can use a North American GameCube. In order to play discs that are outside of the North American region, you'll want some kind of boot disc. This is an action replay disc. You can put this in and then change the region to the region of the disc that you want to use, whether that's Japanese or PAL, and then put that disc in, and your North American GameCube will then be able to run it. Alternatively, you can also get a Japanese GameCube if you would rather just have one of each, or you can get a Wii and put Wii Homebrew on it, and Wii Homebrew has a myriad of programs that will help you boot into Japanese language games. I've used Nintendon't, and you can actually get like a Japanese Wii as well and homebrew that to play North American discs if you want. The Wii is a very useful tool to have. I have the PAL version of Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire. I got this over 10 years ago for $14. This is not that cheap now, but this is the cheapest, authentic way to play Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire. This game is sort of equivalent to the Professor Oak's lab features of Stadiums 1 and 2. You can organize your boxes, store more Pokemon this way, store Pokemon between different save files. There are Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire specific gift Pokemon eggs that you can get. I'd say this is really helpful because trading in Gen 3 across games is kind of slow and a little bit risky. Emerald has like a backup feature to protect the save file in case something goes wrong, and it can reload like an older version of your save file. Fire and Leaf Green do not have a feature like that, so if you are trading manually a lot between all of your games and something goes wrong, I've seen it happen to people in my Discord where they lose their Fire and Leaf Green save data. So back up your save data often with an external save management device. Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire is a good workaround. Is that finally everything? No, it's not. So, Japanese GameCube games need to save to a Japanese formatted GameCube memory card. You can do this through Wii Homebrew. You can do like a memory card manager and make sure that your memory card is formatted to be a Japanese memory card. However, you can't use that memory card with English games anymore. That can only be used with Japanese games or everything will corrupt and it'll be bad. So you'll need a designated Japanese formatted memory card and at least 2 North American formatted memory cards for Pokemon Box. You can't just get away with 1, you need 2. A standard memory card will work just fine for Pokemon Box. It doesn't need to be one of those ultra big ones. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald all have a battery that runs the internal clock in the game. You can't see the change from day to night like you can in Gen 2, but there are a plethora of time-based events that occur. You need to grow berries. Very important. So, you'll want a functioning clock battery in your Emerald and at least one of your Ruby and Sapphire games, if not all of your Ruby and Sapphire games. The only reason you would want a dead battery in Ruby and Sapphire would be for RNG manipulation purposes. So if you plan to do that, you'll want to keep one of them with a dead battery. So this is the type of battery you're going to need. These are CR1616s. They're smaller than the batteries that you need. You can almost not tell in this webcam, but they're smaller than the batteries that you need for the gold and silver games because the cartridges are smaller. And they also have a different security bit. This is a tri-wing screwdriver. It's like a Phillips screwdriver, but only with 3 little prongs on it instead of 4. This is the type of screwdriver you need to open up Game Boy Advance games. And of course, you'll need the typical soldering tools to do it, like some solder, flux, soldering iron, etc. You're definitely going to want to change the batteries in these games before you begin your save files because it's very difficult to fix the clock in a game that already has an extant save file. The save file itself in the game saves some information like how many days have elapsed and what the current time is, but the cartridge saves the rest of the time related to the actual current time on the in-game clock. So if that time is reset, but the save data isn't, it's really hard to get them to line up again. It basically can't be done just with save editing alone. You will need a program called RTC Read that you will flash to a Game Boy Advance game or a DS R4 in order to fix the clock in a game that already has a save file. Now, my Gen 3 100% run has lasted so long that the battery that I put into my Emerald version before I began actually died, and I had to replace it again, and I needed to use this program flashed to a Game Boy Advance cartridge in order to get the clock working again properly in this game that already had this save file with all this work put into it. So now getting into the guide, I have hosted the written portion of this guide on my Patreon. It is free. There's no paywall. You don't have to pledge anything. The link will be posted in all of the places, pinned in the comments, etc. Objective 1 is to plan all of your teams before you start playing anything. These battle modes are the Emerald Frontier, the Battle Frontier, or a Colosseum in XD, and you can use the same team for all the other GameCube specific content, and then main teams for all the playthroughs should you want to use any specific Pokemon. Your battle mode and frontier teams do not need to be raised during the story, and in fact, you're most likely going to want to put these teams together after you finish playing through everything, because then you'll be able to trade between games very easily and move Pokemon between games to take advantage of things like single-use move tutors or the TMs that you have between all of your games. There are also some Pokemon that you may want to make sure have specific natures for the teams that you're going to be raising for these battle facilities, and so that's something to keep in mind during your playthrough as well. So the main purpose for planning these is to make sure that you don't, during any of your story playthroughs, use resources that you would need to raise these teams on accident on the wrong Pokemon. And another reason you're probably going to want to raise separate Pokemon for the battle facilities is there are limited EV caps, and you will need to specifically train your Pokemon a certain way in order to allocate those EVs to the most important stats. During the story, your Pokemon are going to get EVs in all kinds of stats. So if you want a Pokemon to be on both your main story team and a battle facility team, you would have to remove all of their EVs after the fact and then retrain them from scratch. So if you just plan to do the EV training after, you can take advantage of things like having the Macho Brace, makes it much easier. You can, of course, EV train your in-game teams as well, like during the story, but it's kind of difficult and tedious to do that, and also not necessary. You're also probably going to want to breed for decent IVs on most of your Pokemon for the battle facilities. I have attempted to use Pokemon with lower IVs in the battle tower, and specifically in the battle tower, you need a streak of 100 wins in a row in order to unlock one of the secret base decorations, and this is going to be like the hardest thing that you do in Gen 3 is get 100 wins in the battle tower. The battle modes in the GameCube games will probably require EV training, but probably not perfect IVs. You'll just want to worry about making sure they have the right abilities, natures, and EVs for those. So getting into the Emerald Battle Tower, you will want one team of 3 to do the Battle Tower, Dome, and Arena. All 3 of these facilities can be done with the same 3 Pokemon. In the Frontier, there is a species clause, which means you can only use 1 Pokemon of each species on that 3 Pokemon team. You can't use any of the box legendaries or mythicals. You can use Latios, Latias, and the 2 trios of legendaries, which are Suicune, Entei, and Raikou, and Articuno, Moltres, and Zapdos. You can use Latios and Latias, but you cannot use the Soul Dew with Latios and Latias. And the annoying thing about this is that the Frontier will actually let you bring them in holding it, but it will disable the Soul Dew. So it just doesn't tell you that you're not allowed to use it, and instead lets you waste a held item on it, but then just doesn't apply the bonuses from the Soul Dew. The Battle Tower has a doubles mode as well, if you would like to make sure that you get records in each of the modes for each facility. You can also raise a team for doubles. There's level 50 and open level modes for each facility. For the level 50 modes, Pokemon must be level 50 and under, and all the opponent Pokemon will be at exactly level 50. So since you want to get really high streaks in these facilities, you're going to want to also be at level 50 for that mode. Open level mode will match your highest Pokemon's level, above level 60. So you could enter like a level 55 in open level, but all the opponent Pokemon are going to be level 60 at that point. Whereas you could enter a level like 66 Rhyhorn with Megahorn, and all of the opponent Pokemon will then be level 66. Again, the Battle Tower is probably going to be the hardest thing that you raise a team for in Gen 3, so prioritize planning this team for the Battle Tower, and then that Battle Tower team will easily be able to get the symbols for the Dome and Arena as well. The Dome and Arena are not very difficult. The Battle Pike and Battle Pyramid are sort of more survival type modes, so you may want to have a Cleric type Pokemon in your party for those modes. So you don't need to raise a totally different team of 3 Pokemon for the Pike and Pyramid, but you might want to raise like an alternate. So for example, you might want something with Heal Bell, or something with Soft Boiled or Milk Drink, some kind of recovery move, just so that you can survive a little bit better. Because these are kind of more like environment-based challenges. In the Battle Pyramid, you will not be bringing in held items. So the Battle Pyramid is essentially like several levels of a unique dungeon, and within that facility, you can only use items that you find in the pyramid. You can equip them, and then when you leave the pyramid, you get all of your stuff back, and you don't keep the items that you find within the pyramid. The ability Runaway also doesn't work in the pyramid. It will tell you that it's working if you run successfully using a Pokemon that has that ability, but it actually isn't working. And there are wild Pokemon in both of those facilities. So the Battle Palace is a really unique facility that you will want to raise a specific team of 3 for. So within the Battle Palace, you do not get to choose which moves your Pokemon use in battle. Instead, their nature determines which of their 4 moves they will choose to use each turn. And really, the most input you have is like switching in and out. You don't get to do a lot in the palace, so it's very random. So you'll want to raise Pokemon in ways that you otherwise wouldn't. You would want to give them natures that you might not otherwise give them. There's a chart on Bulbapedia of which natures do what, and you'll want to prioritize movesets that are only attacking moves and not moves that would fail if you use them when they're chosen at random. You don't want Detect, for example, because your Pokemon could choose to use Detect over and over again and waste turns in battle with it failing. You probably don't want to have a move like Swagger, for example, where if your Pokemon chooses to use Swagger over and over again, you're continually boosting the opponent's attack and they might already be confused and it's not actually helping you at all. So that's the sort of thing you want to avoid. Mostly attacking moves is safe. So at most, you might want to plan 6 to 7 Pokemon total for all 7 facilities in the Battle Frontier. Less is more in Gen 3. It's really difficult to get good Pokemon in Gen 3. So you'll probably have more fun the less you spend time trying to get Pokemon with specific natures or with good IVs, because you just don't have a lot of tools to cope with that in this game, and you'll face a lot of friction during that process. That's where most of the frustrating parts of Gen 3 come from, is that process of getting good Pokemon. You also probably don't want to plan to use Entei, Suicune, or Raikou, even though you can in these facilities, simply because it's very difficult to get Entei, Suicune, and Raikou in Gen 3. There's multiple bugs impacting the Fire Red and Leaf Green versions of the Pokemon that you can get, and then in Colosseum, you cannot see their natures when you catch them. which makes it very difficult to get like a Suicune with a modest nature, should you want one. The final facility in Emerald that you'll want to prepare for is Trainer Hill, which is a unique facility in which it's basically a time attack. You have a challenge to clear, and you want to try and clear it in under 12 minutes. The facility will scale to your strongest Pokemon, so the most reliable strats for clearing this quickly involve raising some very low-level Pokemon with set damage moves. So your options are Smeargle. You can get at level 10, which is when it first learns Sketch, and teach it Dragon Rage. You can get multiple Smeargle with Dragon Rage. Or the strat that speedrunners use for this facility is getting the Electrode in-game trade from Fire Red and Leaf Green at level 3. There's a man in the Pokemon Lab on Cinnabar Island who wants a Raichu for an Electrode. You can catch a level 3 Pikachu in Viridian Forest and evolve it with a Thunderstone, and then trade that level 3 Raichu to that man and get a level 3 Electrode in return. And this Electrode has Sonic Boom, which I think is set 20 damage, and then use other level 3 Pokemon to fill out your team. So not a lot of prep involved there. You may want to save your Shockwave TM for that Electrode. Now, the GameCube games have their unique battling challenges as well. Mount Battle is in both Colosseum and XD, and you will be doing Mount Battle in both to get all of the prize Pokemon. Colosseum has its battle modes, and XD has Ore Colosseum. So you will want one team of 6 that you can use for all of these challenges. And this team will be level 50 for the level 50 battle modes, and then you raise it up to level 100 for the level 100 battle modes in Colosseum. I think the rest of the challenges will scale to your highest level Pokemon. The reward for doing the battle modes in Colosseum and XD are Poke Coupons, and if you use legendaries like Latias, Latios, Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, there is actually a Poke Coupon penalty, so you will want to use no legendaries for these modes. Another component of this challenge, since new to Gen 3 are contests and ribbons, is you're going to be doing a Ribbon Master challenge wherein you get all of the ribbons on one Pokemon. Your Ribbon Master is going to come from XD or Colosseum, because there are 2 ribbons exclusive to XD and Colo, and it must be a Shadow Pokemon originally because one of those ribbons is awarded when you purify a Shadow Pokemon. So for your Ribbon Master, you're going to want to pick a Shadow Pokemon from one of these 2 games. Keep in mind that their nature should be conducive to winning all contests. Due to the way that Pokeblocks work, I'm not sure I fully understand this. You're gonna want it to just not be a minus speed nature in order to most easily fully max out its contest condition. So that's really all you're looking for, is just a nature that isn't minus speed. This Pokemon will also be on your Battle Tower team in the Emerald Frontier, and will need to take a 1/3 of that team at your 50 win streak in order to get a ribbon at level 50 and at level 100 in the Battle Tower. So you will probably want to plan 2 movesets, if not more, for this one individual Pokemon. One moveset for the Battle Tower when it's on your team. You don't have to use it in the tower for the entire tower, but you can just put it in there for the last 7 matches that you will need to hit your 50 streak for the ribbon. But if it's not a super good Pokemon for battling purposes, then it will just be cutting down your team by 1 Pokemon. So it's something to keep in mind. So you will want to plan a moveset for when it's on your Battle Tower team so that it can be the least dead weight that it can be. And then you're also going to want to plan movesets for each contest. It's possible to do all of the contests with one really good combo of moves, even if it's not like conducive to that contest type. But you could also just plan to change it up for each contest to make it easier. That's up to you. But keep in mind, a lot of the best combos will require the use of move tutors. So for example, Rest and Snore or Rest and Sleep Talk are 2 really good contest combos, but Sleep Talk is a single-use tutor in Emerald, and Snore is only available with battle points in Emerald. Some people want their Ribbon Master to also be a shiny Pokemon. If you want that to be the case, you will need to shiny hunt them in Pokemon Colosseum, because you cannot shiny hunt Shadow Pokemon in XD Gale of Darkness. They are all locked to not be shiny. On the reverse, the Shadow Pokemon in XD all have special moves, some of which cannot normally be learned by those Pokemon. So if you want them to be a Pokemon with a special move, for example, my Ribbon Master is the Singing Meowth from XD Gale of Darkness, you'll want to get them in XD instead. Unfortunately, they can't have the special move and be shiny, it has to be either or. And of course, you'll want to pick a Ribbon Master in this game that is not banned in any of the challenges. So you don't want your Ribbon Master to be Shadow Lugia, for example, because it can't be used in the battle tower. So there are many resources for making a Ribbon Master. There's an entire subreddit dedicated to collecting all the ribbons in Pokemon games. There's many infographics. I have decided to link this Ribbon Master guide by Light Sanctity on Smogon, just because it's a nice written format with lots of details, and the Generation 3 section is short and sweet. Here are all of the ribbons that exist in Gen 3, so that you can keep track of what you need. Basically, it amounts to just getting the 2 from XD Gale of Darkness, the 2 from the Battle Tower, EV Training, Hall of Fame ribbon, and then all of the contest ribbons. So you get the regular ribbon for each contest and a super ribbon, Hyper Master. 4 ribbons per contest, and then 1 overall ribbon for getting an artist portrait painted of your Pokemon and put into the art museum in Lily Cove. I think to get this ribbon, you only need to get in 1 category, so you actually don't need to get a portrait in the museum of 1 Pokemon in every category, you just need the 1. But it's like, you have to win by a certain amount in order to get the artist ribbon. Now, getting max contest condition is likely not actually necessary in order to get all of the ribbons, but it will help. The contests can be very unfair and frustrating, so the higher your contest condition, the less the actual appeal section will determine whether or not you won the contest. And certainly if you need to win by a certain number of points every time, that's gonna help guarantee that you can do that. How do you get perfect contest stats, one might ask? Peter Pansexual has on Reddit, on the Pokemon Ribbon subreddit, written Pokeblock recipes just for you with very specific instructions on how to blend them, what order to feed them to your Pokemon, which berries to use each time. These recipes on this page I'm showing you now are for absolutely max contest condition in every stat on 1 Pokemon. So when they show you in-game your contest stats, it's in that little pentagram with the little green line or shape in the middle that demonstrates what a Pokemon stat is in that contest stat. These recipes will get you the entire pentagram filled in with green. It requires 2 rare berries. One is the Nut Pea Berry, which I showed you earlier is an e-reader specific berry, so that is only available in Ruby and Sapphire. You'll need to get a good number of Nut Pea berries in Ruby and Sapphire, and then have that be one of the 4 games that's involved in blending the berries. Because these are specific recipes with all of the berries accounted for, you need 4 players just so that you can control which berries are blended. Because if you blend with the NPCs pick the remaining berries. If you are all 4 games that are blending the berries, you only really need 1 Game Boy to do the pressing A in order to control the speed, but you do need all 4 games to control which berries are put in to make each Pokeblock. It's actually easier to get better Pokeblocks with just 1 person pressing A, because the other players will slow you down, not speed you up. The other rare berry that is needed for this set of recipes is the Lychee Berry, which today, in the modern world, is only available by getting to Mirage Island, and I will explain how you do that later in the guide. It was also distributed. It was held by the event Zigzagoon that was distributed to fix the berry glitch, but that's no longer available, so this is the only way to get it still. If you cannot or do not want to get the Nut Pea Berry and the Lychee Berry, here are some recipes that use only berries within the games themselves that will get you the best condition for each individual contest. And these are also done using just 1 game. You only input 1 berry and the NPCs input the rest. It's listed in the recipe what number of NPCs you blend with. And this is perfectly acceptable. This will get you a master rank in any of the contests, no problem. It's sometimes good enough to get you master in 3 different contests on 1 Pokemon. On top of that, if you need to evolve Phoebus, this Pokeblock recipe right here for the beauty contest without rare berries, it will guarantee to get you there. Natures will influence how receptive any given Pokemon Pokemon is to any different type of block. For Phoebus, you'll probably want a plus special attack nature Phoebus. And then for the recipes I just showed you for the absolutely maxed out contest stats, you just want a nature that isn't minus speed. Now, should you want your Ribbon Master Pokemon to be a shiny, this guide by Polydoragon has a guide for how to shiny hunt in Colosseum. It's not as straightforward as you would think. Because of the way the game rolls stats for every Pokemon in the game, and because you're catching Pokemon that are owned initially by a different trainer, the Pokemon, if it's going to be a shiny for you, the Shadow Pokemon, it will not appear shiny until after you catch it. And conversely, if a Pokemon appears shiny in battle while it's owned by a different trainer, it will not be shiny if you catch it because it's using their secret ID, not yours. So when you're shiny hunting, you're going to need to catch it every single time to check whether or not it's shiny. When you purify the Shadow Pokemon, it doesn't change whether it's shiny or not. The thing that is determining whether it's shiny is what your secret ID is. So, and feel free to let me know if I got that wrong. I've never shiny hunted in Colosseum. No thank you. So on the subject of your Ribbon Master, here's a thread by Golden Blissey on Smogon that has a guide to move combos and good contest move sets for winning different contests in Gen 3. And it also recommends specific Pokemon for specific contests. You can pretty much win any contest with any Pokemon. I ended up using things like Beautifly in tough contests, even though it barely learns 4 moves that it could even be categorized as tough moves. And a big part of winning contests is putting together these combinations found on Bulbapedia. So this page is really great. It lists all of the different possible combinations of moves you can put together in all of the different categories of contests so that you can plan your movesets for your Ribbon Master to win each contest. Now, as far as choosing your teams for the Gen 3 Battle Frontier, in Pokemon Emerald, there is a thread here that I've linked in the guide by Valentino23 on Smogon. This is for the purposes of comparing streaks, but this has a lot of resources here for planning your teams. There's also entire threads linked and other resources and replies that all have different teams that you can use to try out the different challenges. This team by Ice Phoenix on the Game Facts page for Pokemon Emerald. This team is the exact team that I used to get 100 wins in the Battle Tower. It's a very good team, does use Latios. You'll want to look through these threads to get different ideas about what you might need for the Pike and Pyramid, since you're going to be using the same team from the Battle Tower for the Dome and Arena. As you scroll down, for each facility, there's a reply, and in each reply, you can actually see posts by different people explaining what they used to beat the facility. So that makes it extremely easy to find what you're looking for. This is the Palace. The highest winning record team is this team, the Starmie Flygon Caesar team by Potato Bagel. So that's a very good place to start if you're trying to decide what you want to raise for the Battle Palace and for all the other Battle Frontier facilities. Generally, you just need to be prepared in the Battle Tower to come up against all of the different gimmicks and mechanics that exist. You'll want to have Aerial Ace. You'll want to have a physical attacker, a special attacker. You'll want to have something that can disrupt setup Pokemon, and so on and so forth. It's very difficult to come up with 3 Pokemon that can account for 100 different Pokemon's possible gimmicks. Because it's all randomly picked from a pool, you will have no way to know exactly which trainers you're going to fight and what Pokemon they'll use. But I will get into how you can navigate preparing for the Frontier a little bit later on. This is once we get out of team building and more into how to earn the symbols themselves. Now for the Ore Colosseum, not only could I not find the guide that I used to put my team together for Ore Colosseum, I also don't recommend using the team that I put together because my team included Entei and Suicune, and as I discussed, those 2 Pokemon will both cost you a Poke Coupon penalty for using them to win in all of the Colosseum and XD content. You can use the same team of 6 for all of that. Instead, what I have linked is this thread by Z on Smogon that goes over the different Pokemon in the Advanced Doubles OU metagame. I know that it's not one-to-one with what you're going to find in the single-player experience because the metagame stuff is all designed for what other people are using in the metagame. That's not going to be the same Pokemon you're going to come up against, and a human is not going to make the same decisions as a computer, even with the same team. So, you know, disclaimer, this is not all going to be one-to-one applicable to the challenge at hand. However, most of what is in Colosseum and XD is doubles. Here are some sample teams for the doubles OU for Gen 3. And this might help you pick out, for example, this team by Z, the Sun HO team, is a good doubles team that doesn't use any legendaries. You will not get any Poke Coupon penalties for using this team. You could even probably use Grandma Cookin's Gyarawack team and just replace Zapdos with something else, make a substitution. Or you could just look at the viability rankings and kind of pick a Pokemon out of this list and learn a little bit about double battling in general. This is kind of the best I could do in terms of trying to point you in the right direction to look at people's teams and sort of get an idea of what you want to plan for without having already played it. I will say that in general, the content in the XD and Colo games is kind of more comparable to the stadium stuff. You have a lot more freedom in your team building for that kind of a challenge because it's much more forgiving than trying to get hundreds of wins in a row with absolutely no losses. So getting into the notes about how to get good Pokemon in Gen 3, there's a few different ways you can go about this. The first is you can breed for your Pokemon in Gen 3. In Gen 3, all Pokemon hatched from eggs will know all moves level 5 or below in their learn set. If both parents know a move a Pokemon can learn by level up, the baby will be born with that move. So this is how you can get some moves on some Pokemon at level 50 that they would ordinarily learn much later. For example, I just bred a Rhyhorn with Megahorn to use at level 50. It normally learns it at level 66. If the father knows any TMs or HM moves that the baby is also compatible with, it will inherit that move. This is also very useful for passing down single-use TMs. That same Rhyhorn, I didn't have to use an Earthquake TM on it because the father was the XD Gale of Darkness Rhyhorn, and that already knows Earthquake. You have very little control over passing down natures in Gen 3. In Emerald only, so if you breed in Ruby and Sapphire, this will not be the case. If you breed in Fire and Leaf Green, this will not be the case. In Emerald only, if you give the mother an Everstone, the baby has a 50% chance of getting its nature. 50-50 whether or not it's going to happen. Ability inheritance in Gen 3 can't be influenced at all. Most Pokemon only have one ability. There are a couple that have 2 possible abilities. Ditto, you can get an Emerald after beating the game in the area of the Desert Underpass. This is in Follower Town. Inside the Fossil Maniac's house, you can enter a cave called the Desert Underpass. And that's where you can find Ditto in the post-game of Emerald. Otherwise, it's available in Fire Red and Leaf Green, in the same places it would have been in Gen 1. IV breeding in Gen 3. I've done a few different IV breeds in Gen 3, so I can tell you it's possible. And it's not as annoying as I would have thought it was. Now, it's definitely not as easy as it is in Gen 6. Basically, you have one stats judge in the Battle Frontier. It's an old man who's located in the building directly north of the Pokemon Center in the Battle Frontier. He's sitting on a couch. So he first gives you a rating of the overall total number of all of your Pokemon's IVs combined. He can say their average, which means they have 0 to 90 as the sum of all of their IVs. Better than average is 91 to 120. Quite impressive is 121 to 150. And wonderfully outstanding is 151 to 186. Unfortunately, you don't really get to know what the distribution of those numbers are. You could still have a 0 in something and just really high numbers and everything else. What you want to aim for is quite impressive to wonderfully outstanding. He then tells you what the highest stat is, gives you a rating of that one stat. So relatively good means it's a 0 to a 15. Quite impressive is a 16 to a 25. Outstanding is 26 to 30. And flawless is 31. Outstanding is perfectly acceptable for most important stats, but because he will only tell you the highest stat, a lot of the time, the stats are going to be a complete mystery. You only have like one definite stat to go off of. The way I've been doing this is first, I have been using this guide. This is part 2 of the breeding guide linked in the resources section. It's by Exact and Peter Co. And in this guide, there's a lot of useful information, but the thing that I found the most helpful was this list here. It has what the level 5 stats of every Pokemon in the game with 31s in all stats looks like. So you can look at the nature of your Pokemon and check on Pokemon database or anywhere else that has a list of natures and see which stats are raised and which stats are lowered by that nature, and then factor it in to looking at your Pokemon stats. So for example, I was breeding for Rhyhorn. So I found Rhyhorn's level 5 all perfect stats and what they should look like on its status screen in the game if it hatches with 31s and everything. So I know that a Rhyhorn with a 24 in HP has pretty good HP. It doesn't mean that it's perfect if it has these numbers, but it means that it's in the upper end of what it can have. Because it's level 5, they're not going to be exact. There's only so much variation a Pokemon can even have at level 5. So you're not going to know for sure that it has perfect stats if it hatches with these numbers, but it gives you an idea. So if I had 24 in HP instead of like 23, which a lot of them hatched with, it was a better HP stat. If I had a 15 in attack, I was breeding adamant Rhyhorn, so 15 really didn't mean anything. But if it has 16 in defense, it meant it had good defense. And a lot of special attack, special defense, and speed were all 9, so if it hatched with anything above 8, I knew that those were pretty good stats. Then I would go to the IV checker and get the information from him about what its overall rating is and what its best stats are and what the ratings of those stats are. Finally, I would then plug in that information into Metal Kid's IV calculator. Type in Rhyhorn, select the nature that it hatched as. We'll say this one hatched as an adamant Rhyhorn. Then we take what the stats judge says and fill out this information. Well, actually, I can't even show you because OBS is not capturing the drop-down menus from this webpage. The potentials that are listed here in this calculator are the Gen 4 equivalents. So it has decent instead of average. It has above average instead of better than average. It has relatively superior instead of quite impressive. And it has outstanding instead of wonderfully outstanding. But you can kind of just look at these and know which one equates to which rating in Gen 3. Then you go ahead and check the radio boxes of the perfect stats that he mentions, or the best stats that he mentions. If you have more than one stat that ties for best, say you've got like 31s and more than one stat, and he says that they're all perfect, you have to talk to him multiple times to confirm it. If you have a tie for 2 stats that are both the highest, he will only tell you one of the highest stats at a time. You have to talk to him multiple times because he cycles through them randomly, which means if you have 2 stats that are tied for the best, you have a 50-50 chance of him saying either stat whenever you talk to him. So you often have to talk to him many, many times in order to know all of the stats that are tied for the best. And again, I would figure out which ones I needed to check that many times by looking at their stats at level 5 and saying, okay, I'm pretty sure it has like perfect speed and perfect special defense. I'm going to talk to him over and over again until he says both of those stats so that I can confirm for sure. We'll say it has perfect speed and perfect special defense. The drop down here, it again doesn't correspond exactly to what he says in Gen 3, but rather decent is the same as relatively good. Very good is the same as quite impressive. Fantastic is the same as outstanding, and can't be better is the same as flawless. So we'll say it's flawless. You go ahead and you put in its stats at level 5. We'll say that its overall potential, relatively superior. We'll say that at level 5, it has a 23 in HP, a 15 in attack, 16 in defense, 7 in special attack, and then 9s in special defense and speed. And then we go ahead and hit calculate. And this will give you a better idea of what the possible IVs of this Rhyhorn that we hatched hypothetically is. So its HP is not that good, but based on the overall total, the calculator knows that these 2 stats have to be somewhere between 10 and 29, and this stat has to be somewhere between 0 and 19. So if you get one that you think might have every stat above 20 that you want, but you're not sure because the calculator is giving you such a big range, you go ahead and you level up that one in particular. Say this one has a 29 in attack, then I would want to use this Rhyhorn. This is good enough for me, more than good enough for me. But I don't know that yet, so I need to level it up. So what I would do is I would take it to my Blissey bases, which I will explain how to make in a minute, and I would level it up to 21 after knocking out 6 Blissies. That's usually what it's at. Then I would use Pomeg berries to remove the HP EVs that it would have gotten. Just 2 of them will do. And then I put its stats back in here at 21, and I hit calculate again, and it should narrow it down so that you get an idea of how close you are to what you want and whether or not it's acceptable. You're probably never going to know its exact IVs, and this is fine. In fact, using an IV calculator is already above and beyond what Game Freak expected you to be able to do. They expected you to not know at all what you have. And again, you do not need absolutely perfect 31s and everything, and you're probably not going to get that in Gen 3, because you just don't have the information that you need in order to really narrow it down that much. If you just get like a quite impressive or wonderfully outstanding Pokemon, and you kind of get an idea of what its best stats are, and they're covering all the bases that you want, maybe like it doesn't have perfect HP and it doesn't have perfect special defense, but everything else is above 20 and you're fine with that, that's great. So that's really kind of how it works in Gen 3. You hatch a bunch of them, you kind of check based on its species whether its numbers are a little higher than they would be otherwise at level 5. And then you only check the ones that have like numbers that you think are better than their parents. After you figure out generally what their IVs are, you swap in to replace the existing parents with ones that are better until you have hatched what you want. It's pretty much just like Gen 6. You want to make sure that all of the stats that you want to be good on that Pokemon, their bases are covered between the 2 parents, and then hatch a lot of them until you get one that has inherited the stats that you want from each parent. In Gen 3, this is not as fast because there's still a lot of RNG involved in what gets inherited. There's no destiny knot in this game. You can't control for it, and you can't really ever know with certainty what IVs anything has. So unless you're looking it up through illicit means. But I will say that it took me 2 boxes of Rhyhorn to end up with 1 wonderfully outstanding. And I could have probably stopped there for the purposes of what I was doing and been fine. I got a little addicted to it. I ended up breeding like every box full of Rhyhorn and then getting one that I was like really good. But again, it's not perfect in every stat. It's just above 20, which is what I wanted. If you need a refresher on how breeding works, you're probably going to want to write down the stats of the Pokemon as you're getting them checked, like what their ratings were and what they hatched out at level 5, so that you can easily refer back to like who is in the daycare, who currently has what stat, because in later gens I would use markings in the PC to keep track of that, but in Gen 3 there's only 4 markings and 6 stats. It's not going to serve the same purpose in Gen 3. So the other way to get good Pokemon is RNG manipulation. So Emerald's RNG, which is the random number generator, doesn't function properly. So this is a really layperson's explanation that might not be fully like 100% accurate, but basically the RNG has 2 different components, the seed and the advance, or like the current state. The seed is supposed to change every time you turn on the game under normal circumstances. For example, in Ruby and Sapphire with a working clock battery, this is what happens. When you turn the game on, it generates a random seed. The seed controls which states will show up in the sequence, and so if the seed is functioning correctly, you will get, when you reset the game, different states in different order. In Gen 3, the RNG advances to different states linearly every 1/60th of a second. If you're always on the same seed, the same RNG states will be called every time in order when the same amount of time has passed. So if you turn on live battery Ruby and Sapphire, you'll get different seeds and therefore see different states every time, which simulates true randomness. But when the clock battery in Ruby and Sapphire is dead, the seed is frozen, it never changes. So the RNG states that advance every 1/60th of a second become really predictable. And in Emerald, even if the clock is working, due to a glitch, the seed never changes. So basically what this means is, in live battery Ruby and Sapphire, you can reset the game or soft reset reset the game when you're like encountering Rayquaza, and you will get a different nature and different IVs on the Rayquaza every time you turn the game back on and within the same amount of time encounter it again. But in Emerald, that's not true. So if you turn on Emerald, encounter Rayquaza, catch it, and it's like naughty, if you turn the game off or soft reset, turn it back on, encounter Rayquaza again in the same amount of time and catch it again, it will be the same Rayquaza that's naughty with the same IVs. So this means you can't reset encounters like legendary Pokemon in order to get a specific nature or for shiny Pokemon, because your first few frames will always result in the same RNG states generating the same Pokemon every time. There is a method to shiny hunt in Emerald, which I will explain in a second. Additionally, to synchronize is one of the abilities that's in Ruby and Sapphire, but in Emerald specifically, it was given the additional function that when you have a synchronizer at the front of your party, whatever that Pokemon's nature is, it will influence the wild encounters that you run into to have a higher chance of being the same nature as that Pokemon. So sometimes, like in later games, you could use a synchronizer at the front of your party to control what nature the legendary Pokemon that you're encountering is going to be when you catch it. Emerald specifically, synchronizers don't work on stationary encounters. I don't know why. So you also can't use synchronize to get around this. So Live Battery, Ruby and Sapphire, and Fire Red and Leaf Green are the only two games that you can actually legitimately full odds shiny hunt in or soft reset for natures in. In Emerald, you can shiny hunt. If you keep the game running, you can encounter the Pokemon, see that it's not shiny, run from the battle, leave the room, come back in the room, the Pokemon will be there again, you encounter it again, see that it's not shiny, run, leave the room, come back. You don't turn the game off. So you can then linearly see different states in the RNG that way, but you won't ever be able to soft reset for like a nature that way because you have to catch it every time to see what its nature is. So it only works for shiny hunting and not for getting the nature that you want. So as a result of this glitch and of the battery having such an impact on the RNG states, I wouldn't say that it's like really simple to learn RNG manipulation in this gen, but it's very predictable. So it's a very straightforward concept that you can use a timer program specifically for the advances of the states of the game to count how long you need to wait in order to reach a specific state, because they advance every 1/60th of a second in order, and it's the same states every time. You can use a program like Pokefinder by Admiral Fish as kind of like an encyclopedia to look up all the states in the game, and then choose one to wait for, set the timer to wait for that state, and Bob's your uncle. So that is another option for getting Pokemon. You can also RNG manipulate breeding, sort of combine the two concepts so that you can control, after you put your parents in the daycare, exact state you land on for their offspring to sort of iron the randomness out of it that way. But I don't personally love RNG breeding, not necessarily less work than regular breeding. And the big roadblock is that you have to know the parents that you're putting in. You need to know their exact IVs to RNG manipulate successfully. And as I mentioned earlier, figuring out the exact IVs of any Pokemon in Gen 3 is really difficult without them being level 100 and having no EVs or EVs that you know exactly. If you do want to RNG manipulate to get a shiny Pokemon instead of hunting it the old-fashioned way, you need to know what your secret ID is in order to look it up in Pokefinder to see what frame the corresponding personality value shows up on. In this guide, I have listed a few different ways you could do that. I guess I'm not going to get too much in the weeds of RNG manipulation here because, first of all, not everyone is going to need to do this. You can be successful in Gen 3 without ever doing this. This is just an option, which I think is slightly more justifiable because the RNG in Emerald doesn't work properly. And you don't really have other means of controlling things like the nature of legendary Pokemon or your starter. This is a workaround to the non-functioning RNG that's in the game already, in my opinion. And second of all, I'm not getting too much into it because I have linked some really comprehensive RNG manipulation resources that do a much better job of explaining how all this works. But other than that, unlike Gen 2, there's no way in Gen 3 to increase the odds of getting a shiny Pokemon. So it's pretty much full odds or nothing in this gen. You can kind of manipulate encounters by using Pokemon at certain levels in your party and using repels to weed out encounters you don't want in certain areas, or to use the white flute to increase your encounter rate, but that's kind of it. Gen 3 has a lot of options for getting a lot of TMs multiple times. There's finally an option for getting multiple Earthquake TMs. It involves using the Emerald pickup table. So in Gen 3, the ability Pickup has an out-of-battle ability. This applies to all Gen 3 games. However, each Gen 3 game has an entirely distinct table of items that you can get, and Emerald in particular has different rarity tiers depending on the level of the Pokemon that has Pickup. If you have Linoon, or a Persian, or an Ursaring, I guess it has Pickup, at level 100, you can get unlimited Earthquake TMs, you can get unlimited Focus Punch TMs, and you can get unlimited Rest TMs. It's a 1% chance to get one of these items on top of the 10% chance for the ability to proc at all every time you knock out a Pokemon, whether that's a trainer's Pokemon or a wild Pokemon. So what I did to farm Earthquake TMs is I raised a party of 5 Linoons to level 100 in order to always have a full party of Linoons and have each one of them get that 10% chance to have a pickup item spawn and then have that 1% chance to get the Earthquake TM. I ended up with something like 27 Earthquake TMs after I was done EV training a lot of Pokemon. So it ends up working out, I think. There are many different shops in Gen 3 that have access to different TMs. The game corner in Gen 3 is very forgiving. The best TMs are only 4,000 coins each. There is a guide on how to farm easy coins in the game corner for you. So this is in our Pokemon Emerald by Wrong Owl. It's a little guide on how to farm Pokemon coins very efficiently. Basically, you go to the roulette table, you bet max on one single roulette slot, color, and Pokemon over and over and over again until the board is full. You'll either get your slot picked or you won't. If you do win coins, then you exit roulette, save the game, go back in. If you do not win coins, you soft reset the game and start over. So that's a way to reset to always get a return on the coins wagered, and it's very passive. You don't have to pay attention to it. Easy way to get good coins. There's also service days, which are random events you can get after you beat the Elite Four in Emerald. There's a possibility of getting a random event on TV. Every time you win a battle, there's a 1 in 100 chance of a TV event occurring, and one of those events can be a service day in which the odds are better at the casino, so that's a good day to grind for coins if you need to. The only TM that you need to be really careful about in Gen 3 that you can't get more than one of and that you'll probably need more than one of is Aerial Ace. Unfortunately, you get one Aerial Ace per save file. Sort of fortunately, you will have at least 7 save files in this generation, so you'll have 7 Aerial Ace TMs. So that's kind of a lot to ration out, but it's a pretty necessary TM for the Battle Frontier, and so you will probably need more than one. As for farming money to buy everything that you need, whether it be vitamins or TMs or any of the things that you need to buy, Rich Boy Winston and Lady Cindy on Route 104 will give high cash payouts if you beat them. If you equip an amulet coin to your front party Pokemon when you fight them, and then swap into a Linoon that can use Covet or Thief, then you can both get the boost from Amulet Coin and also steal the nugget that their Pokemon are both holding. And then you can quite easily grind money that way. Using the Trainer's Eyes feature on the Pokenav, you should be able to rebattle them fairly frequently. The single-use move tutors, on the other hand, are kind of more of a pain because they are not only single-use, so one per save file, they're not in every single game in Gen 3, and they also are spread out all over the place. So you have to remember the location of every single one of these tutors and in which games you've already used which tutors. So in the guide, there's a list of all the different moves in each game that you can get through single-use tutors, but then I have also linked these Cerebi pages that have photos of each tutor in each game so that you can easily locate them and remember where they are. So that's all the ones in Fire Red and Leaf Green, and then there's ones in Emerald as well that are also all over the place, and there's also photos of all of these. And then thankfully there's only one single-use tutor in XD Gale of Darkness. She's in Agate Village, one tutor that teaches all of the single-use moves in this game, so she's easy to find. She's in one single cave in the village. In Emerald and XD only, there are also tutors that you can use more than once. In Emerald, they cost battle points. In XD, it's only for Amuse, so you probably don't need to use it. To earn a lot of battle points easily, you will need a metric ton of battle points, so you're going to want to do this. There is a house in the frontier that is south of the battle pyramid. In this house, there's 4 people betting on frontier streaks. The betting man chooses a frontier facility randomly each day to bet on, and on the days that they choose a facility that has a low streak in it already, and that is fairly easy to get like 7 wins in, you go up to him, you bet 15 battle points, then you go to that facility and win that streak, come back to him, he will give you 30 battle points. You can also mix records with another emerald to get the facility that's in their game on that day. In this game, there are move relearners that that easily accessible. You don't have to beat all of Gym Leader Castle to do them in this game. There's a move relearner in Fire and Leaf Green on 2 Island that uses mushrooms, big or tiny mushrooms. And in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, they're in Fallerber Town, and they just want heart scales, which you can get off Wild Love Disc at Evergrande City, or just randomly throughout the game. And there's also one in XD Gale of Darkness that you can use battle points for. So leveling in Gen 3, we're almost done. So the first time that you level up Pokemon, it's going to be kind of difficult. Using the Versus Seeker in Fire and Leaf Green, you can go to Sea Vault Canyon and battle all the trainers there, specifically the ones towards the end of the route, are not only close together, but they have Pokemon that award a lot of experience points. So you can train on these trainers by trading over the Pokemon that you need to level up into Fire Red and Leaf Green and doing it that way. What I did was I used these trainers in Sea Vault Canyon to level up 6 Blissies to level 50. And then I traded those Blissies over to all of my Hoenn games, in which I have secret bases. When you mix records between the Hoenn games and you get other people's secret bases in your games, you also get the team that they had when you mixed records with them preserved in that secret base that you can battle each day. Between all of the games that I have, I was able to make a pretty substantial number of these Blissey bases, and that is now how I level my Pokemon to level 50 and up, is using these Blissey bases. You can delete all attacking moves off of them, and you can also get rid of Growl so that they don't lower your attack to make it take even longer to knock them out. And that makes them very safe to train low-level Pokemon on. And you can also get a Lucky Egg to make this go even faster. So in Fire and Leaf Green, you can get Lucky Eggs off of Wild Chansey, which are in the Safari Zone. Or in XD Gale of Darkness, there is a side quest after you finish the main game to get a Lucky Egg. Here's a guide by Techno Trainer to get a Lucky Egg in Fire and Leaf Green. They've got the level Pokemon that you need to bring with you, a Pokemon that can use Cut and Surf, and then you go to the Safari Zone, and then you get to the area that contains Chansey. If you use a Max Repel, or I guess a Super Repel will also work with a level 26 Pokemon at the front of your party. It filters out Pokemon level 25 and below, increasing Chansey's encounter rate from 4% to a whopping 5.33%. And then this is the method that you want to do to ensure that you have the best chance at catching each Chansey. So they retooled the Kanto Safari Zone. In order to make it more similar to the Ruby and Sapphire Safari Zone, they kind of changed how bait works to make it more similar to Pokeblocks. Throwing bait not only increases Chansey's likelihood to be caught, it also decreases its likelihood to flee. Or if you would prefer, or even if you would like to get more than one Lucky Egg, another option for getting the Lucky Egg is to complete the Lucky Egg quest in XD Gale of Darkness, which I think just really involves going around and talking to a bunch of NPCs. Pretty simple. Finally, there is EV training. So you don't have as many options in Gen 3 to increase your yield of EVs, but there is still the Macho Brace, which you can win from the Wind Straits during the story, and you can equip it to your Pokemon to double the amount of EVs they earn per battle. You can also get Poke Rust, but that is extremely rare and not that likely that you're just really not likely to have it. This guide by Jubilee covers the basics of EV training. In case you don't remember them or need a refresher, basically each species of Pokemon has a different EV that they reward to your Pokemon when you knock them out. This guide on Maryland.com has a breakdown of the EVs, so you can earn up to 252 in a stat with a cap of 510 EVs total spread out between all of your stats. So overall, your EVs can't add up to more than 510. It takes 4 EVs to amount to another stat point in that stat. So usually you'll see EV spreads of 252 in one stat, 252 in a second stat, in the final stat 4 to 6. If you put 6 into one stat, you're wasting 2 EVs, but that just kind of is what it is. It's very difficult to make every single EV count, and it's also not really necessary for one stat point. In addition to that, you can help your EV training by purchasing vitamins. There's many places to do that in the game. You can purchase them for money. You can purchase them for Poke Coupons. You can purchase them with battle points. You can purchase them by grinding berries into berry powder and trading them with medicine people in Emerald and Fire Red and Leaf Green. There's lots of ways to get vitamins. They're very expensive typically. It just cuts down on the amount of EV training that you're going to have to do by a lot. You can put 10 vitamins into any one stat, and that will give you your first 100 EVs in that stat. So that cuts down on how many Pokemon you'll have to knock out to do it. This guide by Jubilee has good hotspots for EV training in stats, like one area that might have a lot of Pokemon that give you HP EVs, or one area that might have a lot of Pokemon that give attack EVs, and so on. Maryland also has a variety of these places written down on their guide. In case you would rather EV train in Fire Red and Leaf Green, there is also a guide for places to do that for each stat here, linked in the guide. Finally, because there are Dittos that spawn in the Desert Underpass in Emerald, another way to EV train, if you need another method, is to take something like a legendary Pokemon that gives a lot of EVs in one stat, bring it down to the Desert Underpass, send it out into battle, have the wild Ditto transform into it, swap in your Pokemon that you're EV training, and then you get the EVs for that legendary Pokemon. It might be technically fewer encounters to do it that way. As you're going, you're going to want to keep track of what EVs you have earned in each stat. Because there is so much to get through in this guide, I'm not going to be doing a team building demo here. But what I am going to do is I'm going to show you my actual document again of what I'm using to keep track of everything for Gen 3. So here I have tabs set up for all the Pokemon that I planned before I began any of the games. I planned out all of these Pokemon. I planned out how I was going to more or less get each one, which species I would want, what movesets they would have, what I wanted their EVs to be, what I wanted their natures to be. Then as I got them, I filled in information like their nicknames, what their IVs are if I could find that information. Some of these I RNG manipulated for, which is why I know their exact IVs. Otherwise I would not, so some of them say like unknown because I am never going to know what their IVs are. I also have a tab here for what I'm using them for, like what battles they're going to be taking place in. And then I have a different tab here with the same teams kind of laid out in a different way so that I can see for which facility I'm going to be using which Pokemon. And as I've gotten them, I've turned the cells yellow to keep track of what I actually have. And then as I finish training them for each facility, I turn the cells green to indicate that they're ready to go. For breeding, I have a list of all the Pokemon that I know the IVs of. Here I have a list of all of the secret bases that I have of all of the games that I've mixed records with, what their teams are, and where they're located in the game and whether or not I've registered the bases so they cannot be overwritten. And here is a list of all of the trainer rematches in the game so that I can keep track of which ones that I have completely finished. Once again, I want to reiterate that you probably don't need to have this many Pokemon in your document. I planned way too many. I recommend only planning about half as many as I have here. Also, you'll notice that I EV trained my in-game team, and I didn't need to do that. That was just me being extra. I wanted to also quickly show you, on this list of items and tutors, I have a list of all of these single-use move tutors, which ones I have actually used, and which ones I have not used yet, which is very handy to keep track of because there are so many different games, and the single-use move tutors are not all in one spot. So it helps to know without having to go into the game and check whether or not you've used it yet. Now let's get into your 100% objectives, starting with Ruby and Sapphire. So Ruby and Sapphire, of course, have unique story modes compared to Emerald. They have the same enemy teams. Obviously, Ruby has Magma, Sapphire has Aqua. Ruby and Sapphire actually are a little bit more satisfying in their storytelling, I think, than Emerald. Emerald has both teams in one game, but Ruby and Sapphire, I think, do a better job of telling the story. Now, if you're playing the GameCube games, there are no Pokemon that you need specifically Ruby or Sapphire for, but if you're not, you will need to get Surskit from either game because it does not appear in Emerald, or once you beat the game, you can get a Surskit Swarm and send that to Emerald via mixing records. Meditite, which is in either game, Roselia, which is in either game, Zangoose, which is in Ruby only, and Lunatone, which is in Sapphire only. You will also need to get the other two Hoenn starters. So whichever starter you plan to pick in Emerald, get the other two from Ruby and Sapphire. You can get both fossils in Emerald, so you don't need to get either fossil in Ruby or Sapphire to trade over, but you will want to get the opposite evolution item for Clamperl than you're planning to get in Emerald. So once you get the scanner from the abandoned ship, take it to Captain Stern in Slateport, and he will give you either the Deep Sea Tooth or the Deep Sea Scale for Huntail or Gorobus. So pick one and then get the opposite one once you start Emerald. The main utility that Ruby and Sapphire are going to be to you is that you can scan the Nut Pea Berry. Once you scan an e-reader berry, you can never trade that berry to any other game. It's tied to that save file. So you'll want to have a working battery in order to farm lots of these nut pea berries so that whenever you need one in another game, you can mix Pokeblocks with this save file. And that's how you can get it for the Pokeblock recipes that require it. So before you begin any of these save files, you're going to want to make sure that between all of your Hoenn games, you have the following trainer IDs. There are the 5 old guys that can appear in the Mauville Pokemon Center depending on your trainer ID. So you'll want a trainer ID that ends in either 2 or 3 to get the Hipster, 4 or 5 for the Trader, 0 or 1 for the Bard, 6 or 7 for the Storyteller, and 8 or 9 for Giddy. So between all of your Hoenn save files, you should have at least the most important ones, which are the Trader, and the Hipster, and the Storyteller. But if you can, get all of them, and coordinate it so that between all of your save files you have access to them all. There's also 3 berries that you can only get if you have a specific trainer ID. There's an NPC on the bottom corner near the lake on Route 120, and with certain trainer IDs that NPC will give you either the Wiki Berry for trainer IDs that end in 1 or 6, the Mago Berry for trainer IDs that end in 2 or 7, and Agua berries for IDs that end in 3 or 8. There are 2 others that are trainer ID dependent, but you can also get those from a different NPC regardless of which trainer IDs you have. And again, almost all of the content that is in Ruby and Sapphire are also in Emerald, so in this section I am only going to be listing things that you can only do in Ruby and Sapphire, and anything that can be done in all 3 I have put under Pokemon Emerald instead. So I have written out a berry route for you to do daily, to farm berries, because that's one of the main purposes of you having a Ruby or Sapphire save file is for the berries. So I did this route every single day, at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, when I was starting out my Gen 3 100% playthrough. So doing this berry route was really effective in harvesting lots of berries, and doing it every single day means that you're not going to have to worry about berries falling on the ground and wasting them. The way I kind of organized it personally was I would plant the berry that I had the fewest quantity of at that moment, and then by the time I went and harvested all of the berries, like after 3 days of doing it, I would end up with like 100 of that berry. So you don't have to be specific about when you time your watering of the berry. You don't actually have to learn the deeper mechanics related to berries at all in order to successfully harvest a bunch of them. But in case you want to, let's look at how berries work. So this is a list of all of the berries and how many hours in each game they take to grow. You can see that the rarer berries sometimes take 48 hours to grow. The super rare berries take 72 hours to grow. So There's a lot of stats in-game for berries that are actually not useful for anything. Like their tags, if you check them, will show their size and firmness, and that impacts absolutely nothing. So to get the maximum yield of berries, you will want to water it at least once per stage. Regrowth can occur up to 9 times if you don't pick the berries before the plant just stops growing altogether. So based on the total length of time it takes to grow a single berry is when you figure out when you want to water them. So this table shows a breakdown of when each stage in a lumberry's life cycle takes place. So from 0 hours to the first 12 hours is the first stage, then from 12 hours to 24 hours is the second stage, from 24 to 36 is the next, and 36 to 47 is the next, and then 48 to 96 is when you pick the berries. So that is for a lumberry, which has a 48-hour growth cycle. But for other berries, it's going to be much shorter. So it's broken down into quarters. So every 3 hours is when you would want to water the berries that have a 12-hour life cycle. Or every 1 hour is when you would want to water some of these berries that have a 4-hour life cycle. Or every 6 hours for the ones that have a 24-hour life cycle. And for the ones that have a 72-hour life cycle, every 18 hours. Oh, some of these actually have 96-hour life cycles, the very, very rare ones. And those you would want to water once a day, once every 24 hours. That is the gist of how to get the maximum yield from each type of berry. I suppose if you wanted to actually be even more strategic than I put in my guide, you could plant them by groups. So you would want to plant only berries that have like the same exact life cycle or length of their life, so that when you went to water them, you could do it on a schedule based on those berries' individual life stages. So you could like plant all of the 12-hour life cycle ones all across Hoenn on that berry route. Do the berry route every 3 hours. That sounds like a lot of work. That's an extremely dedicated way to play the game. I just did it once a day for all the types of berries. I was not this hardcore about it. I would just do this route first thing in the morning when I woke up most days, and it was a really nice way to check in with the game each day and remember to do all of my dailies, because there are daily events across Hoenn, like the lottery, a daily berry gifting NPCs, and so on. As I mentioned in the previous section, you can create Blissey secret bases. You'll want to do that using as many Hoenn games as you have. So in both Ruby and Sapphire, you have an opportunity to make a secret base, trade over your level 50 and up Blisseys, mix records with your Emerald once you start that game, and then trade them around so that each one of those bases has those same 6 Blisseys in it. There are 2 decorations that you're going to need to get from Ruby and Sapphire. So the first one is the red or blue tent. In Emerald, you will have an opportunity to get one of the 2, but you will need to get the other colored tent from Ruby or Sapphire by finishing all of the Trick House challenges, and then you'll need to use the Trader NPC, the old guy in the Mauville Pokemon Center, the green one, in order to transfer that tent to Emerald. The same goes for the C-Dot doll. It's an exclusive doll that you can only get in Ruby, and you get it from Lynette's house on Route 117. As I mentioned earlier, the pickup table is different from Ruby and Sapphire than it is for Emerald. You can't get TMs in Ruby and Sapphire, but the pickup table in these games is not dependent on what level your pickup Pokemon is, so you can get things like rare candies and nuggets immediately. So one thing that you can do is you can like harvest a bunch of rare candies if you want to. In 4 towns of the game, there are different contest halls in Ruby and Sapphire. In Emerald, the only contest hall is in Lily Cove. So what you can do is you can raise a contest Pokemon as like part of your main party, and do each contest in order as you get to them in the game. So you get your first contest pass in Verdendurf Town, which is the lowest ranked contest hall, and then you get the Pokeblock case in Slateport, which is chronologically in order the first contest hall that you see in the game. But you actually want to do them in the order of Verdendurf, Folliver, Slateport, and then Lily Cove for Master Rank. So you'll have to do a little bit of backtracking to do it that way. But yeah, get a Master Rank contest Pokemon during the story. Become a contest coordinator like May. So here's a list of all of the in-game trades in Ruby and Sapphire. There's only 3 of them. They are completely unique from the trainer IDs that you get in Emerald for the in-game trades. So definitely do these, because you'll want as many different trainer IDs as you can for the Lily Cove Lotto. And you'll pool all of your Pokemon with all the different trainer IDs eventually in your Emerald version, and then do the Lotto daily in that game. There's also a couple conspicuous places that they changed the in-game dialogue between Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. So in Ruby and Sapphire, there's an NPC in Petalburg Town that says Norman and his family moved from Johto, and this was changed in Emerald to be more vague, that they moved from far away. So there's a reference to Johto that's only in Ruby and Sapphire. Same with the Oceanic Museum. There's water samples from Kanto and Johto, only in Ruby and Sapphire. And in Emerald, they were changed to like water samples 1 and 2 or something like that. The Reggie quest for all 3 of the Reggie Pokemon, Regice, Regirock, and Registeel, that starts on Route 134 in the secret chamber. You can dive on Route 134 and get to a secret chamber. It's different in Ruby and Sapphire than it is in Emerald. I have opted to only include a link to the Braille alphabet in this guide so that you will actually have to read the Braille in order to figure out the next steps in this quest, because I think it's the most fun that way. But just in case you didn't know where all the chambers are, they're on Route 111, 105, and 120. Now, as I mentioned, the e-reader content can only be done in Ruby and Sapphire in English because it was not implemented in English Emerald. So, scan the Nut Pea Berry and any other cards that you want to do in Ruby and Sapphire. If you have access to all of them in English, then do all of them. You may want to wait to do the battling content until after you've gotten to the point in the guide that you can do Emerald, so that you can use the team that you plan for your Battle Tower team. Since these cards are all 3v3, I can kind of show you what they look like. So I got many of these packs as a kid. Ruby and Sapphire came with these promo cards for Gentleman Nils and Lady Astrid, and I was like desperately curious about the e-reader, so I got tons of packs of e-reader cards. Have like these cards where you can write down the secret Pokemon on each card, since it doesn't show you all of the trainer's Pokemon on each card. It only shows you 2 out of 3. And then it also has a little check mark for you to check off whether or not you've beaten them. And of course, Ruby and Sapphire is the game where you would want to scan the Eon ticket if you want to use the Eon ticket. Once you scan it in Ruby and Sapphire, you can mix records with Emerald and actually send the ticket to Emerald that way. So you can do it in both Ruby and Sapphire and Emerald, but you can only scan it in Ruby and Sapphire. Now, since you're going to be mixing records with yourself, you can do a bunch of fun things in Ruby and Sapphire so that you'll see TV programs about yourself once you mix records with yourself and play through Emerald. Some of the things that you can do to get TV stories made about you to appear in the other games once you mix records. Change a nickname at the name reader in Slateport, or go to do it and then change your mind and cancel changing the nickname. Participate in an interview at the Pokemon Fan Club in Slateport. Make it a goal to catch many Pokemon in one day. There's a news story about how many Pokemon you caught in a day, so if you catch like an absurd number of them, it'll be a more entertaining story once you see it. In one shopping trip, buy more than 10 of one item but less than 100, or buy 100 of one item. Give nicknames to all the Pokemon you catch. There's a story that will run about a particular Pokemon encounter you have and what nickname you gave to the Pokemon once you caught it. So if you give nicknames to all your Pokemon, one of those encounters will end up as a TV story. Battle Gabby and Tai and use one move to knock out both of their Pokemon. So Gabby and Tai actually have like kind of a variety of different dialogue that they can have in the TV program after you battle them, depending on how the battle went. If you use one move, say Earthquake, and knock out both the Exploud and Magneton in one hit, they're really impressed with you when they read the TV story. So that's kind of like the best ending. But you can also do all of the different ones to see all of the different possible dialogue if you want. Go fishing and catch a Pokemon hooked by a rod specifically. Talk to the interviewer after completing the contest. Talk to an interview after participating in the Battle Tower, which you will be doing once you have your Battle Tower team. The problem with making a list of objectives in Gen 3 is that you're kind of gonna need to like do each game a little bit and then do some content in another game and then come back to do content in the first game. So I tried to order them, but you're going to have to come back and do more content in Ruby and Sapphire once you have made your Battle Tower team of 3, and talk to the interviewer at the Oceanic Museum. Gen 3 introduces the trainer card stars, which appear on your trainer card in-game. You can get 4 different stars, and these are different for each game in Gen 3. So these are the objectives for Ruby and Sapphire. They're similar to Emeralds, but they're not identical. So the first one is you get it for beating the game, beating the Elite Four, entering the Hall of Fame. The second one you get is for winning all the Master Ink contests and earning a painting for each. Third is for getting a streak of 50 in the Battle Tower. So the Battle Tower is in Ruby and Sapphire. It's not in the Frontier. The Frontier isn't in Ruby and Sapphire. I believe the SS title, after you beat the game, will take you to like an area with a Battle Tower in Ruby and Sapphire. And complete the regional Pokedex only. You don't need to do the national dex. So there are a few novelties that you can only do in Ruby and Sapphire because they were fixed in Emerald or inaccessible in Emerald. So there's 2 NPCs that can either walk through ledges or walls to challenge you if they notice you from afar. They're Tuber Charlie on the abandoned ship and Aroma Lady Rose on Route 118. So try and maneuver so that they walk through a wall or a ledge in order to challenge you. You can skip getting Dive by trading in a Pokemon that already knows it. Steven will leave the HM in his house for you in the post-game, which he doesn't normally do. And then the third novelty is to hatch an egg in the Silent Room of Origin Cave. You can't get to this room in Emerald, I think. So you can only get here, or at least you can only get here multiple times in Ruby and Sapphire. And if you hatch an egg in here, because there's no music in the Silent Room of Origin Cave, the hatch egg music just continues to play. Your next objective is to beat Leaf Green. So this is going to be a little bit more thorough than Ruby and Sapphire because there is content exclusive to Fire Red and Leaf Green, and you're going to want to do all of it. Leaf Green actually has some pretty extensive 100% completion objectives of its own. They're almost more difficult to do than Emerald. So specifically, you will need to catch a Slowpoke. You will also need all 3 Kanto starters as well as Mewtwo. If you only have Leaf Green, you will need to beat the story and post-game multiple times. Trade each Kanto starter into Hoenn before resetting, and make sure to get both fossil Pokemon as well. So you will need to either get Ammonite in one playthrough and then reset and then get Kabuto, or have 2 Kanto games and get one in each. And if you don't have access to Colosseum, you will need to beat Gen 3's Kanto 3 times in order to get Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, since you can only get one per save file and they're dependent on which starter you picked. No matter how you choose to go about getting all the things you need from Kanto, one save file, ultimately when you're done resetting or between all of the Kanto games that you have, should be your main game for the 100% completion objectives. And if you want to, you can full odd shiny hunt in this game because the RNG works properly. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, you will get a different seed every time you turn the game on. You cannot get Espeon or Eevee, and you can't get any Pokemon into Fire Red and Leaf Green that isn't in the original 150 until after you unlock trading with Ruby and Sapphire and get the National Dex. So the sub-objectives, our first movie watch of the run, you're gonna watch The Wizard of Oz, or if you're French, Taxi, Lord of the Rings, and Silence of the Lambs. Those are some crazy picks. So once again, at the beginning of almost every Pokemon game, there is a movie playing on TV. Fire Red and Leaf Green, if you play as a boy, it's Stand By Me Again. If you play as a girl, it's The Wizard of Oz. And I love The Wizard of Oz. That's awesome. The French localization plays with pop culture a lot, so there's different movies. If you play as a boy, the movie on TV is Taxi. And if you play as a girl, there's a pun about Lord of the Rings and Silence of the Lambs. Now, Lord of the Rings I can kind of see as an adventure parallel, but Silence of the Lambs, that's a stretch. That's your mandatory viewing. One of the main reasons that you're playing through Kanto again is to get all of the Kanto Pokemon and all the Pokemon in general that you need to complete the National Dex in Gen 3. So you're going to want to catch each Pokemon in each area and work on the Pokedex as you go. Of course, one of the trainer card stars in Leaf Green itself is to complete the Kanto Pokedex. What I did, you do not have to do this, is I did a Professor Oak's challenge, basically, and that involved evolving each Pokemon that you can get as it becomes available in the game. So you have to catch everything and evolve it as soon as it's available, which means you have to grind like the starter to its final evolution in Viridian Forest, and you have to hunt for extra moonstones on the Clefairy and Mount Moon. I also went extra hardcore and I traded in all the version exclusives so that I would get literally a complete regional dex by the time I was in the Hall of Fame. So when I got my Pokedex rating at the end of the game, I was at 150 out of 151. But most importantly, prioritize the ones that you can only get in Fire Red and Leaf Green. You'll need to trade for Ekans, Oddish, Psyduck, Growlithe, Shellder, Scyther, Electabuzz, Wooper, Murkrow, Quillfish, Delibird, and Skarmory. Those are the ones that are exclusive to Fire Red. So that's what you will need to trade into Leaf Green, as well as the starters and the other fossil. There are also several trade-only evolutions in Kanto, and there's the 3 roaming legendaries. Now, unfortunately, these are super bugged in Fire and Leaf Green. So in Generation 3, the roamers are Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. You get 1 per save file, depending on which starter you picked, and they only start appearing in the wild after you give the Ruby and Sapphire to Celio and get the National Dex. So you have to complete a lot of content to even get the opportunity to catch them. Now, unfortunately, due to a glitch, if any of these ends the battle by using Roar, which unfortunately all 3 of them know, the game considers it to have been defeated and it will permanently stop appearing. So you have to save before you begin to hunt these. Just to be really clear, you want to do all of your prep for hunting them before you save. So you get all of your repels, you arrange your Pokemon however you need to do in order to strategize to catch the roamers. And then you go to the steps in front of the Pokemon Center on one island and save there. Then you go inside, give the Ruby and Sapphire to Celio. Then you can go to Kanto proper and hunt the roamer. So when you reset, you will reset to the steps outside of the Pokemon Center before you give the items to Celio. Or you could lose the opportunity to get them all together, and unfortunately that's not even the only glitch that impacts them. The other glitch that impacts the roamers in Gen 3 is that the data for a Pokemon's IVs are stored in a 32-bit integer. For roaming Pokemon, these IVs are stored in a unique place in memory and retrieved whenever the roaming Pokemon is encountered in the wild, so that its IVs remain consistent between encounters. However, a glitch causes only the last 8 bits to be transferred from this place, instead of all 32. Due to this, while the HP IV is unaffected, the Pokemon can only have a maximum attack IV of 7, and the other 4 IVs will always be 0. Their hidden power type will always be fighting with a power of 30 or 31. That impacts all 3, Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, which is why I don't recommend trying to get a Suicune to use in the Battle Tower. So Suicune is one of the best Pokemon in Gen 3, but unfortunately it's just really a total nightmare to get one that's usable. Nevertheless, catching these roamers is an objective of the Leaf Green playthrough. The strategy for tracking and catching is pretty similar to the way that you would have done it in Pokemon Crystal in the last guide that I did. The only difference is that now there's abilities, so you can take advantage of things like Shadow Tag. Very important. Get Mewtwo. You need a Mewtwo for the Pokedex, and you can only get it in Fire Red and Leaf Green. Cerulean Cave doesn't open up until after the post-game as well, so you're going to have to do even more content in order to get Mewtwo in this game. There's nothing in the game that tells you to go do it, I think, so don't forget. Find all the items on each map. This is a standard objective for my 100% playthroughs. In Kanto, typically, you would do a sweep back through each area once you unlock new HM moves to go back and get items that you couldn't previously reach. Unique to Fire Red and Leaf Green is that some hidden items on the map will only spawn every 1,500 steps and may not always be there. So I was totally confused by this. On Route 20, there's a star piece that just doesn't always spawn, and it's because you need to take 1,500 steps in order to have a percentage chance for it to spawn. The same is for One Island's Treasure Beach and 3 Islands Berry Forest, and I think the reason that these work this way is because there's no in-game clock, and these items are supposed to reappear what the game considers to be daily, but without the working clock. So every 1,500 steps, enough time has passed according to the game for the items to respawn. But these also have a chance to respawn as well, so you can collect them more than once if you want to. Get the secret lava cookie. near the famous SS Ann truck. You will need to trade in a Pokemon with Cut in order to bypass the SS Ann the first time you're in Vermilion City. Then come back once Surf is unlocked later in the game after Fuchsia City. Surf around the ship to the right side where the truck is, and then on that little strip of land there near the truck is an invisible lava cookie, so you need to go collect that. Talk to all NPCs, read all signposts, etc. This means you're going to be watching all of the Teachy TV tutorials, even though I'm sure you already know all the information that's in them. Check every slot machine in the Celadon game corner. Return to Fuchsia City after entering the Hall of Fame to talk to Janine, who is not there until that point. Complete all of the Fame Checker entries for all possible characters. This will happen as you're talking to everybody, but there are some little factoids that you kind of have to return to areas and talk to people more than once to get. It is more fun to just look for all of them yourself, but in case you're stumped or you don't know where to find some certain tidbits about certain people, you can go to this page on Bulbapedia that's linked in the guide, click on the character whose information you're trying to find. Like, let's say you're looking for someone to talk about Lorelei and you can't figure out where all of the little pieces of information about Lorelei are in the game that you can get into the Fame Checker. Well, you can click on her and then look through the location of the NPC that says it and what the dialogue is so you can add it to your Fame Checker. The Sevi Islands. So the first time you go to the Sevi Islands in the game, you get to go immediately after fighting Blaine on Cinnabar Island, and there's a little bit of content there on the first 3 islands, and then you have to go back and finish all the badges in the Elite Four. And then after the Elite Four, you get to go again. From the dock in Vermilion, you get the Rainbow Pass, and then you can go through each of the islands again and eventually unlock all the remaining islands. Once you go back after you've beaten the Elite Four, there is new content on the first 3 islands, so don't miss it. And also, on the Sevi Islands, bring a Max Friendship Pokemon through the Water Labyrinth on 5 Island to receive a Togepi egg. This is one of only 2 ways to get Togepi in Gen 3. Bring a Lemonade to the Grave of Tectonics, the Onyx on Memorial Pillar on 5 Island in order to receive the TM for Facade. That's one that you can also miss if you just don't happen to have a Lemonade when you're there. Don't forget to do that. So this game introduces the Versus Seeker, which is mostly useful for grinding. You can use it, as mentioned earlier, on 7 Island and Sea Vault Canyon to grind for experience points. But there are also many trainers in the game that get an upgraded team with the Versus Seeker if you battle them again. So, not only do you have to battle all the trainers in the game once, but you're going to need to battle all the trainers in the game twice with the Versus Seeker. Well, the ones that you're able to rebattle. Not every single trainer is rebattleable with it, but the ones that you can. Not every single trainer, I think, gets a new team, but some of them do. So once again, pickup Pokemon function differently in Fire Red and Light Green than they do in the rest of the game. If you get a Meowth with pickup, one of the only ways to get a consistent source of berries in Fire Red and Light Green because you can't grow them in this game, and you can also get some easy money that way, some nuggets and rare candies throughout the story. Once again, this one is not based on the level of your Pokemon. You can get all kinds of items pretty much as soon as you can get a pickup Pokemon. You could trade a Meowth in really early in the game since it's native to Kanto, but otherwise you can catch one outside of Vermilion. There are quite a few more in-game trades in Fire Red and Light Green than there are in the rest of the series, so you're going to want to do them all in order to get all of these unique trainer ID numbers for the Lily Cove Lotto. There are unique Pokemon in 2 places that are only in Fire Red, and there's unique Pokemon that are only in Leaf Green. However, the same trainer gives each one to you, and their trainer ID doesn't change between the games. So you only need to do each trade in 1 copy of the game to get all of the trainer IDs. Most importantly is this trade here, Raichu for Electrode, for Esphere the Electrode on Cinnabar Island. As mentioned, you want to do this with a level 3 Raichu so that you get a level 3 Electrode to use in Trainer Tower and Trainer Hill. Now, we're getting to Trainer Card Stars. So the first star in Leaf Green is, just like Ruby and Sapphire, defeat the Pokemon League. The second one is that you need to jump 200 times in the jumping minigame and collect 200 berries and do Drio berry picking. On 2 Island, is the Joyful Game Corner. So this is where you play these mini games. You need 3 wireless adapters. You need 3 copies of either Fire Red, Leaf Green, or Emerald. Between all of them, it doesn't matter which ones they are, as long as your copy is Leaf Green that you're getting the achievement in. And each game needs to have a duo. You need to have the wireless adapters hooked up, and any hoeing games need to be in Moss Deep already, and any Kanto games need to have reached 2 Island already. So between all those requirements, you need to connect with the wireless adapter and do these 2 mini games. Pokemon Jump is a 2-player mini game, so you can do that yourself if you want to. It probably won't be easy. It'll probably be easier with another person. Dodrio berry picking you cannot do by yourself or even with 2 people. You need a 3rd person. I've tried to do it with just me and Chaz. You can't play well enough to get 200 with just 2 people. So you're going to have to rope in another person. Even if you're supplying the games, you needed another person's brain and hands. So you're gonna need 3 people for this. Essentially, you just need to make 2,000 points in each of these mini games to get these stars. And they all have to be in the same sitting, so you can't like cumulatively get that many points. You have to get them all at once. These are probably the hardest trainer card stars to get in Gen 3. There's such high barrier to entry. It's multiplayer content that requires the participants to have beaten the game, to have a Dodrio, to all have wireless adapters, to all have the right copies of the game. On top of that, you need 3 people. It can't just be 2. So that's a big, tall ask. I think when I'm gonna do this in my 100% playthrough, I'm probably gonna have to like ask my friends in real life to help me and pay them with pizza or something. Because it's probably not gonna be like a super enjoyable time for everybody. And they're probably not going to care about their performance as much as you will. So the next trainer card star is to complete the Kanto Pokédex minus Mew. And finally, you need to complete the National Pokédex minus Mythicals. This is a requirement in a game that doesn't let you trade outside of those games until you've beaten the game. Now, on top of the trainer card stars, this game has trainer card stickers. So here we are. These are the stickers that you can get from the Braggart. This is an NPC who is located on 4 Island. So there are 4 levels of each sticker and 3 stickers. The first sticker is the Hall of Fame. Level 1 is beating the Hall of Fame once. You go to the Braggart after you beat the Hall of Fame. He puts a sticker on your trainer card for having beaten it once. You enter the Hall of Fame 40 times, you get level 2. Go to his house, you'll get this light blue level 2 sticker. The next one is 100 times. Entered the Hall of Fame, the yellow sticker, and finally the gray sticker at 200 entries into the Hall of Fame. Next is for hatching Pokemon eggs. You will want to hatch 300 Pokemon eggs to get the level 4 Hatch a Pokemon Egg sticker, this gray one here. And link battles. You need to win 100 link battles to get the level 4 link battle sticker on your trainer card. This is another thing I have not done yet in my Leaf Green. There's Elite 4 rematches in Fire Red and Leaf Green. Of course, you've already seen that you're going to need to beat the Elite 4 200 times. So you're going to see every single rematch that there is. You don't have to even try to do that one separately. It's just going to happen. So as you're beating the Elite 4, on the same island as the Braggart is Lorelei's home. And every 25 times you beat the Elite 4, Lorelei will put another Pokédoll in her house. And after you win all 200 victories, the house will contain 14 dolls. So make sure to visit Lorelei every 25 times you beat the Elite 4 while you're working on this achievement. Hatching 300 Pokemon eggs. Breeding in Fire Red and Leaf Green is an option. There is a daycare. It's also on 4 Island, but there isn't really like a great place to hatch eggs, and there's no flame body. My strategy for hatching eggs in this game is going to the cycling road, because you automatically travel downwards, so you only have to hold up every once in a while, and then it will automatically travel back downwards again for you to get the steps to hatch the eggs. If you're going to be breeding for IVs in Emerald, what you can do is you can move all of the eggs that you breed and don't hatch into this game using Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire if you're like breeding them in Emerald, and hatch them in this game. The breeding mechanics are better in Emerald, so I recommend breeding in Emerald. If you move every single egg over to Fire Red and Leaf Green to hatch them, that's tedious, so Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire is a way to mass move them over. Or you can just breed some Pokemon that has a very low step count to hatch, do it that way, with no other goal in mind. At the Celadon game corner, there's a little machine in the corner where you can get a photo of your team on your trainer card. Your trainer card can get really decked out in this game, so make sure you go ahead and get your team immortalized and put on your trainer card. Goes without saying you're going to need to complete the post game, which means doing the quest that spans all of the islands to get the Ruby and Sapphire and take them back to Celio on one island to unlock trading freely between Kanto and Hoenn. In Cerulean City, there's a man who has a record on his wall of mixing berries into powder using the wireless room. You don't get a lot of berries in this game. This is another wireless adapter exclusive feature. So what you can do is you can mix berries into powder in the Union Room with your copy of Emerald, I guess, and set a record in his house. And then you can also trade the powder to him in order to get vitamins. Now, Trainer Tower is a mode that's kind of in both Fire and Leaf Green and Emerald. It's a little different in Emerald, but the idea is the same. So in the Japanese version of the game, this place is an e-reader feature, and you can do this in the Japanese version once you get to that in the run. In the English version, the tower is set to always be the same, but it still exists and you can still do it. So the tower is located north of Seven Island. The goal is to get to the top of the tower in under 12 minutes, and there are different modes. There's a single mode, a doubles mode, a knockout mode, and a mixed mode, which has all three. So knockout mode features 3 single battles per floor with 1 Pokemon per trainer, and each trainer challenging the player consecutively. So you can get repeats of these items as prizes from the Trainer Tower in this game, the upgrade, the Dragon Scale, the Metal Coat, and the King's Rock, which are of course useful for completing the national dex. In my guide, I have linked this speed run of Trainer Tower by famed Pokemon speedrunner Worcester, who uses the S-Sphere strategy that I mentioned earlier. He's the originator of the strategy as far as I know, and he explains in depth how to use it to clear the tower in under 12 minutes, which is the goal. He does all of the modes in this video, so it's a very useful thing to watch before you challenge it yourself. Now, here we're getting to the optional objectives of Fire Red and Leaf Green. After obtaining a Deoxys Emerald, you can trade it to Fire Red and Leaf Green to change it into its attack or defense form, which are only available in these games. You can catch all of the unknown in Tanobi Chambers, including the new exclamation point and question mark unknown. I don't think there's like an unknown dex in this game. I tried to check, but I didn't see anything like that. So you would just be doing this of your own volition for the fun of having them all and to fill up your Pokemon box, I guess. There's a little gag if you say the phrase "mystery event is exciting" to the girl at the Pewter City Pokemon Center. She has unique dialogue in response. Infamously, you can obtain multiple nuggets from the Rocket on Nugget Bridge by losing to him. He gives you a nugget when you talk to him before you battle him, and if you lose to him, that flag doesn't get checked, so if you talk to him again and reinitiate the battle, you can get another nugget. So you can intentionally lose to the guy on Nugget Bridge, north of Cerulean City, multiple times in this game to get unlimited nuggets. Is it cheating? Yes, but it's also a novelty you can do if you want. There is a Magikarp size guy on Route 12. Now I'll check in my game really quick to see what my record is for the Magikarp size guy so that you can beat it. So there's a guy who wants you to catch a big Magikarp and show it to him. He'll give you an elixir if you can beat the default record. Also try to beat my record. So the biggest Magikarp that I've ever given this guy is 35.0. So get a bigger one than that. There is also a Heracross size girl on Water Path on 6 Island. She wants you to bring her a really big Heracross, and I have my size of the biggest Heracross I've ever brought to her, which is 54.2 inches. So bring her a bigger Heracross than that. So Resort Gorgeous is on 5 Island. There's a girl named Selfie there. You have to find her in the Lost Cave. And then when she goes back to her house, she will ask you to show her a rare Pokemon. She has a 70% chance of awarding a luxury ball, but I have made it an objective to get a rare prize from her. So show her a bunch of Pokemon. And finally, you can choose to use arbitrary code execution or other distribution methods that usually involve save editing to get the Mystic ticket in Fire and Leaf Green in order to set the event flag and get the ticket to travel to Naval Rock. This event was released in America and many other territories. A lot of people prefer to do all of the event exclusive content in their 100% playthroughs, even if it cannot be obtained legitimately these days. So it's an option. If you feel like it won't be 100% if you don't do these events, I think you should do the Mystic Ticket event in Fire and Leaf Green specifically. Because of the timing of when the event came out, that would have been the main game at that point. So that's why I associate it with Fire and Leaf Green. Next is Pokemon Colosseum. Beat Pokemon Colosseum. If you really want a good Suicune, this is the place to get it. Now, resetting from natures in this game is horrendous. There are 3 flutes in the game, time flutes that you get that you can use to instantly make it possible to purify 3 Pokemon. So you can save those for Entei, Suicune, and Raikou in order to reset for good natures. I tried to reset for Entei the long way, and it took forever to even get a plus attack nature. Like I mentioned, there are 25 different natures in the game, and at most 2 or so will be beneficial to your Pokemon. So the majority of the natures are not going to be what you want, and when you get a nature in a game and then reset, there's no guarantee that you will not run into the same nature again when you catch it again. Like, it's not just a matter of cycling through them all, you can just get the same one over and over again. It's really discouraging, and catching the trio in the game at all can be difficult. Once you do it repeatedly, you sort of memorize these fights, and I have a really good strategy for Dakeem written here because I did it so many times. So, the sub-objectives are to watch Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Here's why. A lot of people don't know this. Horimoto Shinichi, as romanized here, I think it's Shinichi, was the character designer and art director of Pokemon Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness. He was also the author of the Star Wars Return of the Jedi manga series. So he, at this point in time, was most well known for doing manga based on Star Wars, and you can see the Star Wars influence in Colosseum. The Phantom Menace came out in 1999. From Bulbapedia, this is a picture of Phoenix City in Colosseum. From StarWars.com, this is a picture of Naboo in the Phantom Menace. You can see there's a canal that runs all around it, a big dome building in the middle, and fountains inside the larger circle of canal. That looks a little similar, I think, to Phoenix City. There's a big canal around it, there's a fountain in the middle, big dome building in the center, kind of deserty location, Tatooine. This is a picture of Mos Eisley in Tatooine. You can see that there's big rusty buildings, and some very large ones, and some dome-shaped ones. This is a picture of Pyrite Town. Granted, that's not one-to-one, but the general vibe is similar. There's a big dome-shaped building, it's all rusty and made of junk. It kind of looks like Tatooine. This is a picture of the Under from Pokemon Colosseum, and this is a picture of the Undercity from Coruscant. So you can kind of see the similarities, can't you? You can't really see it from this angle, but there's this elevator over here that like floats through the air. And there's all these upper walkways that you also kind of can't see in this picture. This is a picture of Agate Village from Bulbapedia. This is a picture of Queen Amidala's villa on Naboo. You can kind of see they look a little similar. Now, I'm not saying that there is a one-to-one direct correlation. I'm just saying that a lot of the locations in the game seem to be at least slightly inspired by the aesthetics of the Star Wars prequels. And there were many influences on the art direction and the setting. This isn't the only thing that influenced them, but it was a big inspiration, and you can tell that the aesthetic of the game was heavily influenced by the Star Wars prequels. The only one of those 3 movies that was out before Pokemon Colosseum was The Phantom Menace. You're going to start by watching The Phantom Menace to really immerse yourself in the whole vibe of the world of Ore. Your objectives, of course, are to catch all the shadow Pokemon and purify them. Now, how you do this is up to you. I have gotten extremely efficient at catching and purifying all the shadow Pokemon in the game as fast as possible. I wouldn't say I'm a speedrunner, but in terms of doing a playthrough that doesn't involve any grinding and catches and purifies all of the shadow Pokemon, this is the strategy that I use. So first, you use Espeon as your only non-shadow Pokemon throughout the game. Reset this Espeon for a plus special attack nature. You will want it. Catch all of the shadow Pokemon as you go throughout the entire game. So you're going to want to save before each shadow Pokemon fight, and I will show you a good walkthrough to use so that you can predict when you're going to need to save the game, so that you can reset if you fail to catch a shadow Pokemon. This will prevent you from having to redo entire areas of the game later to go back and just get one Pokemon that you missed. Then as you go, add all the new shadow Pokemon that you catch to your party as you get them, and rotate them through your second slot. So the whole game is double battles. In your first battle slot, it's always going to be Espeon. In your second battle spot is always going to be a shadow Pokemon. You're going to always use Shadow Rush for the opportunity to go into Hyper Mode, and whenever you're in Hyper Mode, you're going to call them out of it, and that's the fastest way to purify each Pokemon in the game. Just cycle them through, take advantage of all of the battles in the game to purify the Pokemon so that you don't have to grind later. There are 3 Pokemon that are really good to help you catch Pokemon that you can use as needed. There's Noctowl, which has really high special defense and has hypnosis. It's great for the early game. There's Misdreavus, which is a ghost type Pokemon. The AI has no idea how to deal with ghost type Pokemon in this game, so it's very reliable, avoids Earthquake, has hypnosis. And you can use both of these Pokemon by the time you reach Takim. Altaria has Sing. It's a bulkier, stronger Pokemon. It's higher level than the other 2, and you'll probably be relying on it by the time you get to Venus and Ein. So Espeon can tank pretty much everything in the game, and it also gets Morning Sun to recover HP. You can use Reflect and Light Screen to help it out. Only 3 fights in the game will require more strategy than just spamming Psychic on Espeon and occasionally wasting turns healing the Pokemon that you brought to put Pokemon to sleep, and using Shadow Rush over and over again to put your shadow Pokemon into Hyper Mode to call it out to purify it. So one of these fights is Takim. I have done Takim so many times. As I mentioned, I tried to reset for an Entei, so I have this fight down. It's really a predictable fight. Having done it many, many times, he always leads with Metang, and then the other Pokemon is always either Golem or Marshtomp. The Pokemon that you want to bring into the fight with Takim are Purified Slugma, Mantine, Noctowl, Quagsire, and Misdreavus, as well as Espeon. Lead with Slugma holding a Quick Claw. You will have this by the time you get there. And Mantine. So on Mantine, Bubble Beam either Golem or Marshtomp, whichever he sent out, and then use Flamethrower on Metang. The first turn, Golem or Marshtomp will use Protect, and Metang will use Earthquake. If the Quick Claw procs, then Slugma kills Metang in 1 turn. It's a 10% chance. If it doesn't, Slugma dies before it does anything. It's fine. Then you send out Misdreavus, and you alternate using Confuse Ray and Bubble Beam on Marshtomp and Metang. Golem will die in 1 hit to Bubble Beam once it's not protecting. You'll be able to take care of it pretty quickly. Both Marshtomp and Metang take neutral damage from Bubble Beam, and Confuse Ray will keep them from doing too much damage to you and make them die faster if you're lucky. Once they're both confused, Misdreavus can also use Shadow Ball to help deal more damage. Next, he sends out Camerupt and Entei. So Bubble Beam, Camerupt, Hypnosis on Entei. Quagsire, Noctowl, and Espeon are there for backup. If Misdreavus is still doing well in health, it can put Entei to sleep and keep it asleep. You can heal it. You should bring healing items to this fight. It's pretty predictable, but just in case. Noctowl has really high special defense and will survive a Fire Blast by Entei, so it's another option for putting it to sleep if it wakes up. Eventually it'll run out of PP for Fire Blast anyway, so it doesn't end up being that big a deal. You don't need to have like infinite healing items. Eventually, when Entei is like at half health and asleep, you can start chucking balls. Actually, you can start chucking balls immediately. You can just start throwing Ultra Balls at it, and if you're lucky, you'll catch it. If you're really unlucky, you won't. But he's a fairly easy Pokemon to catch once you've taken care of Camerupt, because Camerupt can kill Entei with Earthquake. But as long as Camerupt is off the field, which it should be within like 1 or 2 moves, you're totally good. The other 2 fights that you cannot solo with Espeon are Dellen and Nella, which are the 2 dark type users in the last like 5 battles of the game at Rilgam Tower. So in these 2 fights, instead of relying on Espeon, you're going to be using mostly Shadow Sneasel and Shadow Skarmory. Keep them in Hyper Mode, even if they're ready to be purified, don't purify them yet. Keep them in Hyper Mode and then keep using Shadow Rush. You'll get a lot of critical hits if you're lucky, and that will help you take down these dark type Pokemon that Espeon cannot deal with. You can also catch Shadow Pokemon in these fights, so if you end up having to redo these 5 fights a few times, you can start bringing the Pokemon that you catch in them and those are some of the best shadow Pokemon that are in the game or at the very end of the game, so that'll help you survive. You can also hold off on purifying Raikou, because Raikou is fairly tanky and also a pretty good, reliable shadow Pokemon that can also spam critical hits. Then you get into the post game, and you can either continue to use this strategy, it will keep working, but it will get kind of progressively more frustrating, or you can trade in some higher level Pokemon from Leaf Green. You might have access to level 100s at this point because you have access to Sea Vault Canyon in Leaf Green, so you could trade in some level 100s or really high level Pokemon to help with the post-game content, and that'll help you catch and purify the last few. The alternative way to play, which is probably, I admit, the more enjoyable way to play, is to set up a team of 6 Pokemon that you enjoy using, purify those 6, and actually level them up throughout the game. Use them like a normal Pokemon playthrough, don't purify anything else. And then after the story is over, take all of your shadow Pokemon and spend 2 additional days grinding at Mount Battle to purify all of them. It is kind of hard to keep 6 Pokemon up with the level curve in this game, especially in the post game. It's much easier if you just use only Espeon, because Espeon will gain enough experience points to stay caught up in levels with everything else, but 6 Pokemon is much harder to do. So you might have to stop and grind even during the story. Shadow Pokemon cannot grow until they're purified. They do earn some experience, but the game basically throws out the majority of experience points that they earn as shadow Pokemon, so you really can't raise them until they're already purified. Now let me show you a good walkthrough to rely on to make sure that you do everything in the game. So this walkthrough on PokemonLP.fandom.com is a pretty comprehensive walkthrough of everything that there is to do in Pokemon Colosseum. It'll let you know which trainers coming up have shadow Pokemon, so when to save. It'll let you know when trainers are available to rematch and which ones and where they are in the game, and you'll want to go do those. And lots of other stuff like all the additional optional content. You won't miss any of it if you follow this walkthrough. So you want to beat the game and the post-game content. After you beat the game, a variety of different things open up that you can do. There are 2 items that are easy to miss in this game. The first is when you're in Real Game Tower, Egan will call you on your Poke thing, your radar. He doesn't make it clear that he has something for you, but what he's calling you about is that he has a Master Ball for you. So you actually do want to stop what you're doing and immediately go to Agate Village and go get it. And then you can come back and the next shadow Pokemon available is Heracross. The second thing is that you get an item called the Steel Teeth. In the Under, there's all these different discs that you get to move the elevator around. The last disc that you get is the F disc, which takes you over to an old man, and if you give him the Steel Teeth, he will give you the amulet coin. Talk to all the NPCs, read all the signposts. It's really, in particular, important to pay attention to in Colosseum, although your eye is not necessarily drawn to it. Try and pay attention to little details like the environments that you're in. It can be easy to miss this. The camera can be really zoomed in at places, but the environment of the game helps tell a lot of the story. You want to enter and win all of the in-game Colosseums, which is a different thing than entering all of the Colosseums in battle mode from the main menu, which you will also need to do, but not during the story. You'll want to clear Mount Battle in the in-game mode, which again is different from the battle mode from the main menu. You get different rewards. Before entering Pyrite Colosseum in the story, re-enter the Pyrite building and fight your way through it a second time in order to have a secret boss fight with Miracle Bee, who a lot of people don't even know exists. Return to the pre-gym in Phoenix City after defeating Venus in order to fight Justy. He has a pretty hard fight in there that you also never have to do. Now, complete Mount Battle in battle mode. Trade over the team that you plan to do all the XD and Colosseum content with into your Pokemon Colosseum save file. Then go to battle mode from the main menu, not the story mode. Like, save and quit the game from the main menu, go into battle mode. Then register the party that you have on your save file in Colosseum as your story mode team for battle mode, and then do Mount Battle that way, and you will be given Ho-Oh as a reward once you clear all 100 trainers. That's a little convoluted. It can be easy to enter a plethora of wrong ways and not get Ho-Oh. So make sure you do it that exact way. Along those lines, you're going to want to use the same registered story mode team to beat all of the battle mode Colosseums. The reason you want to do it this way is you are rewarded Poke Coupons for beating it. If you link up your Game Boy Advance to your GameCube and use the team from your Game Boy Advance and register it and run the Colosseums that way, the Poke Coupons are sent to your Game Boy Advance save file, and then you're splitting them because you can't then transfer the Poke Coupons that are sent to your Game Boy Advance to your Colosseum save file in order to pool the amount that you have earned in-game with the amount that you're earning in your Game Boy Advance. It's so messed up. So you want to make sure you're doing it all from your Colosseum save file registered team, so that all of your Poke Coupons go to the same place and you have the total amount in order to buy the things that you need. There are 6 Colosseums in total, each with a level 50 mode and a level 100 mode. You're going to want to do them at level 50, then level up your team and do them again at level 100. There's also singles and doubles. You can use a different team for each mode, but you probably don't need to. These battle modes are really not very difficult. The main thing that you get from doing them is Poke Coupons. You're going to want to get 60,000 Poke Coupons in order to get the 4 exclusive berries that are only available from Colosseum and XD. You need the Ganlon, Salac, Pitaya, and Apricot berries. These are purchasable with Poke Coupons from the Mount Battle Poke Coupon shop, and then you can give them to your Pokemon to hold in Colosseum and then trade them to your Game Boy Advance games in order to get the berries in your Game Boy Advance games, where you can then plant and farm hundreds of them if you want. And then after you finish off Colosseum, use the Jirachi bonus disc to get a Jirachi for each of your save files. You can get an unlimited number of Jirachis. It can be repeated as many times as you need to, as long as the save file that's receiving Jirachi has not already received one from the disc. It's also holding a Salac or Ganlon berry. So this is another way you can get these 2 berries without spending the Poke Coupon, so that you can save them for TMs or held items. Your next objective is to beat XD Gale of Darkness. In XD Gale of Darkness, all of the Pokemon in the game have a special move once you purify them. Most of these have the same move, it's only a few different moves that repeat over all of the different shadow Pokemon. Some of them have Refresh, some of them have Heal Bell, some of them have Charm, some of them have Sing, some of them have Sweet Kiss, a few of them have Helping Hand, a few of them have Baton Pass. Togepi gets Tri Attack, a couple of them get Morning Sun, 2 of them get Follow Me, and Lugia specifically gets Feather Dance. This game is only necessary to get Lugia, but if you don't have Fire Red, it will fill in a lot of other pages in your Pokedex as well, and you get a lot of Pokemon with special moves as mentioned, and it's the easiest source of a Lucky Egg in Gen 3. So unlike Colosseum's confusing system, there is no battle mode in the main menu of this game. There's only a story mode. So you do everything in this game in the story as the protagonist of XD. Once again, you're gonna watch Star Wars Episode 2 and 3, Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. I'm sorry. This is a picture of Naboo. This is a location in the second prequel movie of Star Wars, and you can see this would have been out by the time that XD Gale of Darkness was made. This is a picture of Railgam Tower in XD Gale of Darkness. You can kind of see a similar motif going on. So you can just look at this and see the Star Wars inspiration right away. This is Dark Isle. There's an equivalent of stormtroopers here. There's an equivalent of Sith here. There's lava. There's platforms with lava. Here's Mustafar from StarWars.com. This is where the climax of the prequel trilogy takes place. It's basically Dark Isle. They're the same place. So go ahead and finish that prequel trilogy before you begin XD Gale of Darkness. In XD, there are 83 shadow Pokemon, but don't freak out. You still need to catch and purify all 83 of them, but this game introduces the Purification Chamber, which is basically a completely passive way to purify shadow Pokemon, so you don't have to choose between having fun and purifying them efficiently. You can just make a team of whatever 6 Pokemon you want to use for the whole game, and put all of your shadow Pokemon in the Purification Chamber. They will be purified passively, throughout the game. So you can still purify everything by the time you're done with no additional grinding. So in this game, Hyper Mode was replaced by Reverse Mode. So Shadow Pokemon no longer have that like added benefit of extra critical hits, so there's no real reason to keep them as Shadow Pokemon versus in Colosseum where they're actually more useful in battle as Shadow Pokemon. The main gist of the Purification Chamber is that you want to align all of the Pokemon within the chamber so that each one of their typings is technically super effective against one of the next Pokemon's typings in the circle. So you can choose this if you want by catching a ton of Hoppip, since all Hoppip have one type that is technically super effective against another, and Hoppip can be caught at Pokespots. Or you can just like think about it for 2 seconds and arrange the Shadow Pokemon that you've already caught. To purify Shadow Lugia, you're gonna have to set all of the different chambers within the chamber to have their purification meter at max, so basically just arrange Pokemon optimally within the purification chamber so that everything is super effective against the next Pokemon, and then you'll be able to purify Shadow Lugia. Once again, you're going to want to beat the game and the post-game content. On the same wiki, there is another ultra useful walkthrough for XD Gale of Darkness because it's a great walkthrough. Once again, you won't miss anything if you follow this walkthrough. It has every item. It notes every trainer. It lets you know when all of the rematches are so you won't miss any of them. Every so often, there's a man in Agate Village who will give you one berry at random. So you'll want to visit him. I'm not entirely sure how the game determines how often he does that. I don't think that this game uses the clock. I could be wrong. But visit him every once in a while to get some berries. They're useful. Talk to Acri at the parts shop in Gatium Port after Phoenix City to get a gift. You have to sort of answer some questions and you can get different gifts from them. Talk to all NPCs, read all the signposts, etc. In this game, there are things called crane memos. In Colosseum, there were the Ein files, which were similar. I think you have to read the Ein files when you find them. I could be wrong. If I am wrong, make sure to read them. You don't have to read the crane memos, so make sure that you read them all, because they're text that's easy to miss. Battle at each in-game Colosseum as they become available to you. There are multiple rounds at each Colosseum, and every time you clear a round, you get a TM, so this is a great way to get some extra TMs. When you visit the pre-gym in Phoenix during the story, if you exit the gym and then re-enter the gym, then you can battle Jesty. So Mirror B is in this game. He has a radar, and you have to go find him when it goes off in order to battle him, and he has a Shadow Nose Pass that you need to get. He will also have any other Shadow Pokemon that you fail to catch, and he's kind of annoying to track down, so maybe save before you fight trainers that have Shadow Pokemon in this one too. In this game, you can save anywhere, unlike Colosseum, so it's very easy. And you can rematch Gonzap at the Snag and Hideout in the post-game of XD. If you lose to him, the game will behave as if you won. So you really only get one chance to fight him, because he'll be gone if you lose, but you'll still get the reward for beating him. So don't lose. Or do, if you want to see what happens. In this game, there are battle CDs. At the very start of XD Gale of Darkness, you kind of are dropped into this simulator battle where you're using an awesome Salamence against a Metagross, I think, and it turns out that it's not real and you're actually a loser kid. But that battle simulator is a feature in the game. There are battle CDs, there are 50 that you can find all throughout the game, and they are little battle sims or battle puzzles that sort of teach you the mechanics of the game and let you play around with doubles mechanics. And I think that this is really clever and really fun. Some of these are really hard to get within the game themselves, so you have to actually go out of your way to get all of the CDs and find them all. So here on Cerebi is a list of all of the battle CDs, and it explains which scenario is in each battle CD. Even knowing how to solve some of these, it might take you multiple tries, because some of them are really tough or are RNG based. But it's really fun. For example, you've got this Magcargo and Cacturne scenario where you have to knock out all of your opponent's Pokemon in one turn and they're all Shedinja. So you have like their set moves and their set species to deal with, and you have to figure out how you do that in one turn. This one was so frustrating. The CD37, it's all Dynamic Punch Pokemon. You have all Dynamic Punch and they have all Dynamic Punch. Everyone is confused and it's awful. So you also get good rewards for doing them. For example, in CD41, you get a rare candy. You get a Slackberry from CD44. You get a Sacred Ash from CD46, which is maybe one of the only ways you can get that in Gen 3. Yeah, it says right here. Battle CD46 is the only way to get Sacred Ash in any of the Gen 3 games without going to an event. That's fun. You also get 15,000 Poke Coupons for beating all 50. That is enough Poke Coupons to get one of the 4 rare berries that you need, and they're also all in XD. So you don't have to get the 60,000 Poke Coupons all in Colosseum, by the way. You can do it between the 2 games. There's also Battle Bingo. So Battle Bingo is a additional mode. It's within Railgun Tower. You go up to a counter and you like pay to play, and then you can win Poke Coupons. There are specific boards and they all have a set solution. So within this guide that I've linked, that it just includes the solution and which moves to make in order to win. You don't have to use the guide. If you want to, you can. You can try and figure it out on your own, but if you're struggling, it's here. You know, just don't memorize what I'm showing you right now if you don't want to use it. There are 3 basic difficulties of boards, each with 3 boards. There's Novice, Regular, and Expert, and then there's 1 extra board, the Psychic card, and then there's a special board, which you unlock for beating all the other boards, which is the Bonsly card, the bingo cards. Boards, whatever. And finally, we have Ore Colosseum, which is the closest thing to Pokemon Stadium in Gen 3. There's 7 rounds with 4 matches each culminating in a boss fight against a former Cypher admin, and each time you clear a round, you win a TM, and they get progressively more difficult. So first up is Lavrina. Once you beat her, you can begin the quest to get the Lucky Egg. And for that, you're going to want to use that team that you did the battle modes with in Colosseum. So since you did them at level 100, you're probably going to be doing Ore Colosseum at level 100. Although Ore Colosseum does match the highest level of your Pokemon. So you can do it at a lower level, and all of the trainers will match you. So I guess in theory, you could also do it. Could you do it at level 3 with a Sphere the Electrode? That would be really funny. Once again, you're going to do Mount Battle, and you're going to do it 3 times. Even though there's not separate battle modes in this game from the story mode, you need to do it all 3 times in order to get the 3 gift Pokemon, which are a Totodile, Chikorita, and Cyndaquil. This is another way to get the Johto starters, and they all have special moves. Totodile gets Crunch and Hydro Cannon, Cyndaquil gets Reversal and Blast Burn, and Chikorita gets Ancient Power and Frenzy Plant. And you'll want to use your Ribbon Master on this team at least once in order to get the second ribbon that's only in XD Gale of Darkness, which is the Earth Ribbon. Once you have a Mew, you'll want to trade it into this game. This is not until you do Objective 11, which is completing the National Dex, that you will get a Mew most likely, but once you have one, there's a Mew move tutor in this game, and it's super weird. So this is a reusable move tutor that's in the lobby of Mount Battle. It costs 5,000 Poke Coupons to use it. This tutor then gives you kind of like a quiz, and based on the progression of questions and your answers, you are randomly assigned a 4-move set, including one of these special moves. That is like the most asinine. First of all, to even have a Mew in Gen 3, almost nobody did. Second of all, it costs 5,000 Poke Coupons every time. And third of all, it's random. It overwrites all of the moves that your Mew knows, and you have one special move that it gets within that move set. I have no idea why they did this. This is so absurd. Anyway, you should try it. I did it, and I did it over and over again to get my Mew role play, because I think that that's a really funny one for it to know. Anyway, and there are 3 in-game trades in XD Gale of Darkness. So in XD Gale of Darkness, you can trade your Purified Togepi for an NPC in the Outskirts Stands, Elekid. Now, Togepi gets Tri-Attack as a special move. I just checked, and it can't get Tri-Attack any other way. It can only get it from XD Gale of Darkness. It's not an egg move, it's not a tutor move, and it's not a TM. Until Legends Arceus. Apparently, it can get Tri-Attack in Legends Arceus. It's also a TR in Sword and Shield. So you get that Tri-Attack Togepi, and you can trade it for this Elekid. The Elekid knows Cross Chop, Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and Thunder Punch. In Gen 3, Tri-Attack Togepi is more special than Elekid with these moves. Cross Chop is an egg move. It learns Thunder Punch by level up, Fire Punch and Ice Punch are tutor moves in Emerald. If you evolve the Togepi, you can still trade him the Togetic, but then you just get a random Elekid with none of these moves. I don't really know why they did this in-game trade. If you do this in-game trade, you get one more unique trainer ID for the Lotto, but you're giving up a much more special Togepi for this kind of not that special Elekid. There are 3 other in-game trades that you can do in Pyrite Town. These are all for Pokespot Pokemon that you just catch at the new feature in XD, which is Pokespots, where you leave bait out and you can catch Pokemon that way. There's really no reason you need to do that. I guess you can catch them all. You can make that a sub-goal if you want. Unfortunately, all 3 of these trades are all from the same person, so you get 1 ID for doing all of them. So I'm gonna have to stop here for the night. As a Christmas gift to myself, I'm not going to force myself to edit a 4-hour video in 1 month. We will come back next month, and I will go over the remaining 4 objectives, starting with Pokemon Emerald. The guide is already up. It's on Patreon. If you want to get going on this, you already can. And check out Retro Island Gaming.